Welcome to the 2022 Mobilizing Medical Missions Conference, better known as M3. Hi, welcome. Good to have you here. My name's Chuck Pryor. I'll be your MC for tonight. Now, M3 is virtual this year, but that doesn't change our vision to help you connect with others, to be inspired, and to find your mission. The conference will get underway in about 30 minutes or so, but before we get started, I wanted to tell you how you can navigate the online dashboard. There's a lot of great resources there, and it'll help you get the most out of this year's M3 experience. First, if you're watching on the Lakewood YouTube channel or maybe the Lakewood Facebook page, the M3 dashboard can be found directly at m3missions.com/2022 conference. At any time, there's a play button with a link that will take you directly to the live stream. Now, underneath each name is our roster is tonight's speaker. There will be a read more link right there. You can actually lead to get more information about the speaker's organization, the session content, and a whole lot more information than we're going to have time for in the program. Just to the right of the speakers is a variety of links under Explore the M3 Conference. Here, you'll find the conference handbook. It's a great tool. This is where you can view and even download the schedule, as well as the speaker and exhibitor information, and a whole lot more. In addition, the resources link will connect you with mission opportunities, as well as a place to connect with other missionaries and ask great questions. In fact, speaking of questions, all throughout tonight, we're going to have Q&A sessions, and I want to encourage you to make sure you ask those questions, because hopefully we'll be able to get to yours as well. Our exhibitor link connects you with a list of our partner organizations that offer opportunities to serve both locally and abroad. There's also a download available that shows which organizations offer service opportunities in your area of interest, whether it's medical, missions, clean water, human trafficking, refugee care, and a whole lot more. Let's take a deeper look at one of those exhibitors now with this piece from Joyce Meyer Ministries. We appreciate Joyce Meyer Ministries and their support of the M3 conference. So back to m3missions.com and the dashboard and all the great tools that you're going to find there. We have these poster presentations and the project of the year that we'll have, and we'll make those presentations a little bit later in tonight's live stream. But those two links will give you the ability to take a deeper dive into both, as well as the opportunity to view the winning academic poster presentations for yourself. Thanks again to our sponsors. We're able to offer this year's conference absolutely free of charge. So be sure to tell them thanks and to check out the sponsors link in order to learn a little bit more about these generous organizations. M3 is a cross-denominational event, and we're honored to partner with a diverse network of churches to help spread the word and the work about M3. Some great churches right here in Houston, like Houston First Baptist, Woodlands Church, First Presbyterian Church of Houston, and Memorial Drive Presbyterian. Check out the church partners link and find out a little bit more, or maybe your church is interested in joining in the future. M3 continues to touch hearts and lives of people who attend. To hear from past conference attendees on how M3 has impacted their lives, I hope you go to the testimonials link. And if you have a testimony of yourself, we would love to hear it. So I hope you'll take time to share. You can email us that story at M3. It's info@m3missions.com. We'd love to hear your story. Though M3 is virtual this year due to the pandemic, our hope and our goal is for the 2023 M3 conference to resume in person, right here in Houston, right here at Lakewood Church. We're certainly grateful for the many ways the internet has allowed us to connect in a season of isolation, but there is nothing that can replace the ways we are inspired, connected, and energized when we meet face to face. And we would love to see you next year. To register for the 2023, there is a link that actually provides a special 50% off code in the conference handbook that you can use tonight, actually, to register for next year's M3 conference. That code expires on February 27th, I should tell you that, but don't wait till then. Just go ahead and sign up. You'll find that in the handbook. And then finally, if God is tugging at your heart and you want someone to pray with you about your next steps, click the M3 prayer room link after tonight's session to connect one-on-one with one of our prayer partners. That room will be open immediately after tonight's conference ends. Now, I'll be back shortly to open the event with hosts Dr. Paul and Jennifer Osteen. Once again, we're thankful that you're here. We're thankful that you've joined us for this year's 2022 M3 Mobilizing Medical Missions Conference. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
from the Woodlands to the world, we're one church built on the Word of God. And when you connect everything to God's heart, you connect everything to God's purpose, you come alive. So the only hope for this hurting world is the church, the body of Christ, being the hands, the voice, and the feet of Jesus Christ. No matter what happens in our culture, no matter what happens in our world, we're going to serve Jesus Christ. And we're going to lift him up, for he is our hope. I believe with all my heart that the church is the hope of the world. The church of Jesus Christ, being the church, the hands and feet of Jesus, that's the hope of our world.
If you are just logging in, welcome. It is so good to have you here. Hello, my name is Chuck Pryor, and the 2022 M3 Mobilizing Medical Missions Conference is just about to begin. Before we get started, Yeah, we want to hear from you. In fact, we want to hear from you wherever you are. In fact, while you're on social media, make sure you tag Mobilizing Medical Missions on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and there's plenty of opportunity for Q&A during this time as well. If you go to m3missions.com, there's all kinds of great helpful links like the testimonials link. You'll find it again at m3missions.com on the dashboard. You're going to find some really powerful testimonies and find out who found their calling and connected with their community through this very conference. In fact, if that happened to you, we'd love to hear your story as well. So many life-changing stories have been shared already. So make sure that you share your story by emailing us info@m3missions.com. Watch these stories and then prepare your heart for what God intends to do in your life this evening. You might just discover your mission.
It's amazing how God can work to inspire us and to continue to lead us on the path that He has for us. My name's Sarah Weber, and I'm a third-year medical student at McGovern Medical School here in Houston. And I first came to the M3 conference in 2019. So I'm actually originally from Colorado Springs, Colorado, and then I went to college at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, and came here for medical school. And I really think, looking back now, that that was all part of His plan to bring me to this city and to really the largest medical missions conference in the world. Since I was pretty young, I've felt called to medicine, and I've wanted to use that in medical missions. But as I kind of went through college and the stress of pre-med, it's easy to forget about my original calling. And so when I heard about M3, I really wanted to come and reignite that spark that I had had as a young girl. One of the speakers really struck me and resonated with me. Her name is Lauren, and she's a nurse who's about my age. And she used to work here in the medical center, and she came to M3 when she had been working for a little while in Houston. And I remember her saying how she felt like a young, shy girl who didn't have much to offer God. But when she came to M3, she was really called and felt like she could serve God. So I'm a triplet and an identical twin. And I remember when I was listening to Lauren's story, she shared how she is an identical twin as well, and how it was really hard for her to leave her sister and go off and do missions. My sister has actually been a missionary for 3 years now in Honduras. Hearing from her that she was able to go and leave her family that she was so close to and serve God in a foreign land was really encouraging to me that I can do the same. The next summer, I actually got the opportunity to go to the Amazon in Brazil. We were living on a boat, going down the river and visiting different villages to bring medical care to them. And one of the amazing things that I saw is how God uses medicine to open doors. God called us to another village, a very remote village. They had never let foreigners in, but they let us in because we had medical care. So we ended up spending 4 days there and healing a lot of people, but also getting to share the love of Christ and the knowledge of Christ with people. M3 has helped me focus during my training, and I've been able to kind of realign my vision. During medical school, it's easy to get distracted with your studies, and there's a lot of emphasis on just kind of furthering yourself, but M3 has brought me back to those roots of wanting to serve God and serve others through medicine. I know you're watching online this year, but I would really encourage you to attend M3 in person next year. The connections that you can make as you're walking the exhibit halls, talking to people, being inspired by the way that God has called them to missions. I think that you'll really find that the experience here helps you hear from God in a new way, in a fresh way that will encourage you in your journey.
My name's Anna Swanson. I'm an attorney by profession. Currently, I'm serving with the International Justice Mission in Mombasa, Kenya in Africa. 2019 was the first year that I attended the M3 conference. When I went to M3, wow, my mind was blown to see the vast scope of work that God is using people to do throughout the globe. My idea of missions was completely revolutionized. I was encouraged at M3, I was inspired at M3, and little did I know that year after year, as I was attending the M3 conference, God was using it to prepare my heart and my mind to eventually leave my position at a prominent global law firm to move to Kenya and to be doing the work that I'm currently doing.
A thousand stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night. And you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers. Only you provide, because you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are, it's who you are,
Hi, and welcome to the 2022 Mobilizing Medical Missions Conference, better known as M3. My name is Chuck Pryor. I am the Executive Director of Joel Osteen Radio on Sirius XM, and I'll be your MC for the next couple of hours. Now, M3 is virtual this year, but that does not change our vision to help you connect with others, be inspired, and find your mission. We have an amazing roster of speakers and events lined up for you tonight, so I hope you'll stay tuned, get comfortable, and be here through the entire conference. But before we unpack all of those details, I'm honored to be here with our M3 hosts, Dr. Paul and Jennifer Osteen. Dr. Paul, good to be here again, and take a little bit, get us unpacked for these next couple of hours.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks. Absolutely. Well, welcome to the 2022 M3 Conference. We're glad you chose to join us. We know several thousand people around the world are watching tonight, many of them from different time zones. I know it's 1 o'clock in the morning in Nigeria, it's 6 o'clock in the morning in India, but thanks for taking time to be a part of M3. We are really excited this year about just a great lineup of speakers, and we just wanted you to know that we're excited that you're here. Let me just give you a little brief shot of what M3 is about. M3 is all about connecting people. You know, everybody has a desire to be with people of the same tribe, be with people that have a desire to influence and impact the world for Jesus. But very rarely do we have an opportunity to connect with each other. M3 is all about just giving us, the tribe, a time to connect with each other and get to know each other and spend time with each other and be inspired by each other. And then the second thing is we like you to hear from people who are knee-deep in the trenches doing the work of ministry all around the world. So these are some amazing people doing amazing work all around the world. And so we want you to be inspired as you hear from them, as I'm inspired every time I hear them. And then the last thing we want you to do is to check out our exhibitors. This year we're not in person, but you can check out all of our exhibitors on the M3 website. And hopefully as you look at those exhibitors, they're all ministry organizations that are doing great, credible works around the world, and they need you and your help. Hopefully, as you look at those ministry organizations, God will stir your heart, and you too will want to be involved. But you know what? I wanted to say thanks to all our sponsors.
Yeah. We do want to thank all of our sponsors and the churches that support us. We're so grateful. So many here in Houston and around the world. Joyce Meyer's Hand of Hope, First Presbyterian, Houston's First Baptist, Woodlands Church, and Memorial Drive Presbyterian are just a few that help us make M3 happen.
Yeah, we couldn't do it without our support and the support of our sponsors and our donors and our churches. And you know, Chuck, this is cross-denominational. It's across different denominations, and so we're excited about everybody that's helping us. But you know what? We have a great lineup of speakers. We're excited about everyone, but we're really excited about our keynote speaker, Mr. Bob Goff. Bob, you're here. Would you just come up for just a second? We're so glad you're here. Applause for Bob. So glad you're here.
How fun is this? Good to see you, Jeff.
This is your second time here, so good to see you.
Chuck. How fun is this?
How have you been doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay for an old guy. Yeah, still rooting for the Red Sox. This has been a season for us. We've wanted grandkids for the longest time. I've been making hoodies for my kids that said "Make People," and so now we have 3 of them.
Wow.
The third one is going to arrive this week.
That's amazing.
So it's happening.
Now tell me about, isn't it the Oaks?
Yeah.
Tell me just 1 minute on that.
Yeah, we just moved a little bit closer to town. Instead of me going everywhere else, we kind of brought the party to me.
Yeah.
So we got this as an old Young Life camp, and we converted it and made it just a really comfortable place. We kind of got rid of the corn dogs and the bunk beds.
Yeah.
And we said, let's just make a place where people can come and just deal with whatever they need to deal with. So there's some people that have some trauma stuff, so we have counselors there, and then other people just want to unplug, learn how to write a book.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
You know, Bob, we're really looking forward to you speaking a little bit later in the program, but can you give us just a short preview of what you're going to be talking about?
Yeah, I want us to not be distracted. You know, that is one thing that has just got everybody off. We're like off message because we're totally distracted. We're distracted by the things going on around us, and then we're not spending any time going on with what's going on actually within me. And so I think the thing that takes us out of the game is that we stop paying attention what God's doing within us because we're so distracted by what's going on around us. So we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, we're excited to hear that. So you don't want to miss Bob toward the end of our program, but we're excited about that. Chuck, I think we're about ready to start.
We are, as a matter of fact. Thank you, Dr. Paul. Bob, good to see you again, and look forward to hearing from you tonight. Now, if you're joining us live on the Lakewood Facebook page or the YouTube channel, we're thrilled to welcome you to the 2022 M3 Conference, Mobilizing Medical Missions. We want to hear from you, though, and we want to hear from those who have committed to medical missions. And tonight, we know that you'll be inspired to reach out and to reach the world with the love and hope of Jesus Christ. As you hear from our speakers tonight, we want to welcome you with the questions. Every session will have a Q&A immediately following their speaking session. So make sure you submit your question in the chat of Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're watching us, and we'll make sure to try to get your question in. It's time now to get started with tonight's very first speaker. He is a nurse practitioner who serves with Samaritan's Purse International, and he's going to talk to us tonight about developing resilience for a missions calling. I hope you'll give an M3 welcome to Tim Mosier.
Everybody tonight as we consider what God is doing in missions and what our part might be. You know, overcoming the challenges of the pandemic and the barriers in ministry and missions that we've all experienced during this time is going to require a lot of fortitude and intentionality in pushing forward past these barriers to get beyond them. This conference can be a moment in time when we can stop and think about where we are and where we want to be. I'm really humbled to be able to offer some thoughts tonight about God's desire to redeem all of this we've been through and even in the distant past. My name is Tim Mosier, and I'm a retired firefighter, paramedic, and fire chief with 33 years of experience, and I worked part-time as a registered nurse through those years also. I was born and raised in Lima, Ohio, and I continue to work there as a nurse practitioner in family medicine and in the urgent care. My wife and I have had the privilege of being part of 2 church plants in that church, providing some leadership and guidance. And we've raised 4 beautiful daughters and have 7 grandchildren. It's been a very full, busy, and richly rewarding life to date. I can assure you that I would be much less nervous attending to a multiple vehicle accident on the interstate outside the doors of this conference center than talking to thousands of people tonight. But it's such a wide and awesome array of committed believers in Jesus Christ who have the mission right in front of them. And so it's really an honor again to be here with you. When I was 19 years old, I felt a strong draw to disaster response, and I went on a few missions trips that were short-term to Central America, as I was already a paramedic at that age. But as with many of you, life and children and family and work kind of short-circuited some of that for a period of time until about 15 years ago, when I really felt God calling me to missions activity. I was maturing in my medical skills and my decision-making, and God began to open the doors for missions work. In this last 15 years, I've traveled on over 25 trips abroad to places like Iraq, Ecuador, Peru, and Haiti, serving in disaster response, and to other places for various types of clinical and relief work. I've also served in disaster relief and response in the States here with both governmental agencies and NGOs. I'm a member of the Samaritan's Purse Disaster and Response Team, serving on 9 deployments, and I was most recently in Haiti in August after the earthquake, serving with Hero Rescue, who is the only functioning 24/7 paramedic service there. So in light of those many trips, many in very tough places, I've experienced the sights and sounds of suffering people, much like many of you, maybe most of you. It has not been an easy journey, and I have learned that the call of missions requires endurance and resilience. The past 2 years of this pandemic have deeply impacted most medical workers, and I'm sure you're aware of that. And it has presented coping challenges that most of us never expected. You know, it's one thing to go off on a missions trip to a hard place and come home, back to our life, but this pandemic has brought the disaster to our home, and we've all lived in it and through it. Whether you're a career missionary serving in a tough place, or a newer hospital nurse, or maybe a respiratory therapist, you have been touched by the crush of this pandemic. Tonight, I want to share a personal story as an example of how God can redeem our experiences and our suffering as we walk as caregivers in obedience to our calling. Because I believe that God loves us too deeply to let our calling be our undoing. So the story begins with my flying into Haiti 2 weeks after the 2010 earthquake. Along with 4 other doctors and nurses, we were there to help at a local orphanage, but ended up down at the field hospital of the University of Miami. It was a 200-bed hospital located at the airport. I was immediately put in charge of triage, pre-op, and what I call the death tents, where we put the terminal to die. It was about 100 degrees daily, and I triaged up to 100 severely injured patients every 10-hour day for 1 week. I was not a nurse practitioner at that time, but I made a lot of patient care decisions on my own to help facilitate the patient flow and keep things moving. I felt very much in God's perfect will and timing, and I seemed pleased that God was using me in this way, because I'd never been at a large-scale disaster before, even though I've been on hundreds and hundreds of emergency scenes. It was chaotic, but manageable. Things came naturally to me, and it seemed like people appreciated strong leadership and decision-making in that environment. Vehicles came with anywhere from 2 to 10 injured patients, sometimes multiple vehicles at one time that had to be triaged. These poor people were so severely injured, laying around for more than 2 weeks without any medical care. A wound care section was attached to the triage area where children were treated all day long for their wounds, and unfortunately, that screaming was in the background all day, every day. International media was everywhere, often in the way and needing physically pushed out of the area. The pace was exhausting, and over the first 6 days of my time there, I slept 5 hours. The intensity and sights of dozens of grievous wounds every day was very difficult. Many of the staff was new to disaster response like myself. One night, one nurse ran off out into the middle of the airport runway, babbling incoherently. Another night, I was asked by a physician to give a pediatric patient a medication intravenously, and in my hazy mind, I couldn't figure out why it didn't seem right. I went ahead, and the patient immediately went into respiratory arrest, but the patient survived. Moral and ethical injuries abounded daily. Highly esteemed doctors from the Baltimore Shock Trauma Unit were weeping every evening, telling about the terrible ethical decisions they were making they never ever had to make. I had to place a 7-year-old girl with some form of encephalitis in a death tent with her father. Over the next 24-hour period, I totally forgot to periodically give her Ativan to help control the seizures she was experiencing. And she died before I got back. I still remember the last time I saw her as her father held her lifeless body, dressed in her pretty blue frilly dress. This one incident became a major point of grief for me over the next couple of years, as it represented our inability to meet the needs of these suffering people in a way that we're accustomed to. I could not get past the image of her suffering for hours while her father watched helplessly, especially as I have 4 daughters of my own. At the end of the week, our team knew we were spent and we needed to head home. The university was not able to get additional staff in, and the pressure was really mounting. On the final day I was there, one nurse was watching over 125 patients in one tent. At one point, it appeared no one would be coming to relieve us, and I was at a breaking point, In my sleep-deprived state, I felt very desperate. And as I was talking to one of the doctors about our concerning situation, I said, I walk right out of this place and leave it behind if nobody comes to replace me. I was fearful of dying, and I gave into the mindset of self-preservation. After I got home, I reflected on this time in Haiti. I would constantly be distracted during my workday by the memories coming out of nowhere. Images filled my head as I lay down at night. The words I spoke in haste came back to me again and again. My failure to trust God at my weakest point haunted me deeply. I would occasionally say to my wife, I'm having a moment, and she would know I needed time to collect myself, whenever that was. The visuals of all the suffering I had witnessed made me consider leaving medicine. I said to God, I've had 30 years of this, I'm done. I saw more trauma in that 1 week in Haiti than I'd seen in 30 years in my pre-hospital career. Over the next few months, God softened my hard edges, and I felt Him clearly saying that He didn't lead me down this road of 3 decades of training and experience to now turn away and effectively waste all that He built in me and what He was planning for my future. Eventually, I decided to go back to Haiti and work in a cholera clinic. This would help me to get back on the horse and be energized again about mission. This was exactly the right move, but yet I would find that the inner work in my heart wasn't quite yet complete. During the multiple trips I made there, we would drive by the massive earthquake burial ground on Route 1, some of you may be familiar with that, every day, back and forth. And every time we drove by there, I would think of that little girl suffering. I would also be reminded of my faithless words about walking out of a field hospital and leaving hundreds of suffering people alone to fend for themselves. 3 years later, after many trips to Haiti, I decided I had to deal with my guilt and pain. While there on a medical trip, I decided I would write down all of the issues on paper, spelling them out one by one, as both a confessional and an acknowledgement of that which I was not able to come to terms with. As someone who doesn't go much for symbolism, I could not see any other way. So I wept, I grieved, and I suffered over those words as I wrote them for about an hour. I wrote of the deep sorrow for the little girl and the pain of failure to relieve her suffering. I wrote words of repentance for lacking trust in God's sovereignty over my well-being. I wrote of my shame in not being more open about my faith with other medical workers at the field hospital, and I asked God to renew my spirit for the difficult work I knew He was calling me to. That evening, I asked 2 other nurses to stand with me as I located a pile of dirt to use as a safe zone for my symbolic ceremony, where I would burn the written papers. I then prayed, and when ready, burned and buried the paper as a symbol of leaving all the pain and guilt behind. I stayed in the moment for a while in the company of these loving friends until I felt empty of the burden. That truly was a turning point for me. Peace came and the guilt was lifted. I was reminded how the words of Psalm 23 had carried me through my time at the field hospital. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. The pain faded and I felt wholeness being renewed within me. While these are still difficult memories, the thoughts of my failures and my faithfulness no longer haunt me. After that time, I experienced a new zest for medical missions and determined to complete my master's degree in nurse practitioner, since I would be retiring from my fire chief job. I completed my school, retired from the department at age 52, and immediately I was deployed with Samaritan's Purse to Liberia to treat Ebola in the jungle. Soon after arriving, the now famous story of Dr. Kent Brantley and Nancy Wright-Bull contracting Ebola exploded on the international scene. I was supposed to work alongside him, but ended up being one of the providers that cared for him. Once again, I was in the center of a historical event by happenstance. I was part of giving Dr. Brantley the first ever human infusion of the ZMapp monoclonal antibody therapy. He had a very significant improvement from this, and the next day we prepped and sent him back to the United States. You might remember the images of him stepping out of the ambulance there in Atlanta. The night of his departure, I experienced the most profound sense of being in God's perfect will and timing. After we suited him up and sent him off in the back of the pickup truck, I walked the quarter-mile trek along the ocean by myself back to my residence on that warm summer night. The deep joy and satisfaction of trusting God without reservation through all of that fear and unknown was unlike anything I have ever experienced. It was then I could see that God had been preparing me for decades to be involved in a highly dangerous, world-shaking event that would allow for his name to be made famous around the world. He knew that I needed to be disciplined and trained through painful, high-pressure situations again and again for that moment. He had created the ability within me to stand firm in the face of Ebola with my teammates, trusting him this time, no matter the outcome. In the midst of the storm, God gave me the passage in Psalm 118, "I will not die but live, and will proclaim what the Lord has done." And indeed, this has really happened to me. Anytime I have doubts about where God is leading me, I remember these events knowing that I can serve with full confidence. Perhaps this story resonates with you tonight. Perhaps my words touched a deep place in your heart. Have you struggled through this pandemic? Are you struggling right now? If you have felt there is no way out, I want to remind you there is. God is ready, and his Spirit is willing to bring wholeness. Yes, things like rest, recreation, diet, and exercise are very important in our resilience, but we ultimately depend on our loving Father to reach the deepest recesses of our heart and set things right. He knows what each of us needs right now, and he will do the work that only he can do. Like me, your pain can be a springboard to greater ministry and love for those you are called to serve. Your Haiti experience can become your Ebola experience. Because remember, God loves you too deeply to let your calling be your undoing. Again, God loves us too deeply to let our calling be our undoing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Extraordinary, some provocative thoughts on compassion. As Tim joins us over here at the broadcast table, we want to welcome you to ask Tim questions. So a couple have already come in. There's still an opportunity for you to submit them. Whether you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're joining us, there's some Q&A in there. Feel free to ask Tim a question while we have him here.
Yeah, good. Tim, I just wanted to, one thing that struck me was that you were 19 when God first spoke to you. There's a lot of 19-year-olds out there, 20-year-olds, young people, and you know, you didn't really act on that until many years later, but sometimes God puts a dream in our heart as a young person, and then he brings it to fruition later. Can you comment on that?
You are so right, and I remark to many young people that they even have opportunities abounding that I didn't have at that time. But certainly, God is forming it in you early on, and we need to stay with it. We need to be encouraged. And you can see that I needed preparation to do those things. We don't just rush right in and do them most times. And so we have to be patient with the process. Get education as a medical provider, get experience, prepare yourself, and God will open up amazing doors in time as you're faithful to do that.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. You know, I think Chuck has a couple questions, but you know, Tim, a lot of people, since we served together at SP in Iraq together, a lot of people want to be involved in disaster relief, but they're not necessarily nurses or doctors. Is there any way that they can be involved?
Certainly, there's actually more opportunity in non-medical things, in my estimation, in disaster relief with non-food item delivery, shelter, food, and a lot of other opportunities, especially within Samaritan's Purse that I work. I've often kidded about transferring over to logistics so I can go more often. Because medical being specialized requires a lot of special logistics. But there's so many other things that you can do, and if you look through some of the exhibitors here at the conference, I think you'll see there's all kinds of opportunities that are non-medical. Some are in support of medical, and some people I know do both. Nurses I know will put their hand in one type of relief work, and then they'll do medical work. So there really are plenty of opportunities no matter who you are, even no matter what age you are.
Exactly. I know IT, plumbers, people that are good with construction, just lots of opportunities to help.
Tim, I found it interesting that, as a fire chief and a paramedic and all of the things that you've done, how have you found that that combination of your experience helped you with being compassionate and doing what you're doing now?
Well, I think actually compassion is what's driven it.
Yeah.
I think that's what God has created within me, a high level of compassion and being the kind of person that is willing to do anything, to lead sometimes, to follow sometimes. And a broad range of skills makes anyone a better person. Even as a medical person, you can learn how to do basic plumbing and these things that may actually help you on the mission field, or mechanical skills for vehicles and all these things. So I see it as all being woven together, and I think that's just how God created me.
Yeah.
So good.
We have a question from one of our guests that are here. Can you actually tell us a little bit more about Samaritan's Purse and what Samaritans is actually doing overseas and what compelled you to work with them particularly?
Great question. Of course, I can't even begin to tell you how much the agency does. You'd have to go online, SamaritansPurse.com, to see all kinds of relief internationally, all kinds of special programs, a heart program, a cleft palate program, not just the disaster response that I do, long-term programs, and even in the United States, if you didn't realize, there's disaster teams around the nation all over the place doing flood cleanup and that kind of thing. What got me involved was after the earthquake, when I recognized I needed to get back on the horse, as it were, Samaritan's Purse opened up nurses to come and work in the clinics. And part of it was that they take care of your expenses once you're there. And so that just made me rush right down there and put to work my nursing skills and be involved in the missions environment. And it just fed on itself after that.
We have a question from Trifina watching us tonight in Dominica, actually, wanting to know, do you happen to know how they might be able to get involved with Samaritans in the Commonwealth of Dominica?
Well, actually, we have team members all over the world. I believe we're somewhere around 1,500 team members with a lot of growth anticipated. If you go on the website, you will find that there's an application to apply. And so there are very few limitations, maybe logistically, but technically, as someone who does not live in the United States, you can still be on our team. And actually, we want that because we want to be able to deploy people quickly and not just from the United States.
So good.
Good.
Yeah, Tim, I loved what you said that, God loves us too much to let our calling be our undoing. I think you pretty much unpacked that for us. But, there's a lot of people right now that are stressed in medicine, a lot of people who are overworked, compassion fatigue, a lot of burnout. Any final thoughts in regard to that? I know you said you have to come to your Heavenly Father to restore your soul, but any final thoughts?
I think the one thing that maybe came out a little bit in the story is we really need people around us when we're in the crisis moment. You can't really do it by yourself unless God has made you in a special way. And that's the two friends, and my spouse, of course, couldn't be with me at that time, but I think it's a personal connection with people that love us, and that's what's going to keep us out of the hole.
Yeah, so good, so good. Well, thank you, Tim. That's wonderful. We appreciate you sharing with us.
It's been
Thank
great.
you, Tim. We appreciate that. Thank you for being with us tonight. And thank you for joining us as well. And Tim, we want to mention the prayers of the entire M3 family are with you as you continue to do what you do.
Amen.
God bless you. You might see behind me, we have viewers from all over America, all over the world, as a matter of fact. And we invite you, while you're viewing, connect with us. We'd love to hear from you. Say hello. Tell us where you're watching from. Maybe give us a little shout out. We'd love to say hello to you. And of course, for all of our speakers tonight, there's a Q&A session just like we had with Tim. And so we want to invite you to do that. If you're sharing on social media, in fact, let your friends know that it's going on. The broadcast is happening right now. We're live. You can actually share that. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, however you're connecting, of course, you can go to m3missions.com. We have so many resources there for you as well. Every year at M3, we have an academic poster presentation award. These are people who are doing research on different topics concerning global health, and they present their research and their findings in a poster presentation. These are judged by a panel of experts, and every year we award the top 2 finishers a monetary prize. All of the poster presentation submissions are on the M3 website, and all are really fascinating. So I really want to encourage you to check them out, be inspired. Dr. Paul, the moment has come to tell us about this year's winners.
Yeah, that's right, Chuck. Our runner-up award goes to Carolyn, I hope I get this right, Maroic. That's very close, I think, and Kelly Johnson for their presentation on New Lens Photography Pilot Program. Carolyn's here with us tonight. Carolyn, can you wave at us? We want to congratulate you. Where's Carolyn? Right there in front. Thank you. And the winner of our 2022 M3 poster presentation is Mike Navalio for his presentation on Child Legacy International Clean Water Climb. And Mike is here as well with us tonight. Mike, can you stand up and let us give you a hand as well? Right there in the back. Yeah, good. Awesome.
And don't forget, all of those presentations can be found on our website, m3missions.com. Thanks to everyone who submitted one of those for this year. It's on the conference dashboard. Our next speaker is the Dean and President of the Institute for Internal Medicine, here to discuss From Disaster to Durability. Would you give a M3 welcome to Dr. Nicholas Kamenelis?
A young mother pushed her way into my consultation room at the Kalukim Hospital in Angola, a nation in southern Africa. In her arms, she held a child, and she shouted to me, "Oh, doutor, por favor, ajude-me, o meu filho está bem doente." "Doctor, help me, my son, he's so sick." I immediately came over to her side, and she showed me Ezekiel, little boy about 3 years old. He lay limp in her arms, his eyes half open, and he was gasping. "Come with me," I said. And we scurried down the hallway to the little emergency center where I gave Ezekiel oxygen and an IV antibiotic. But it was all tragically late. His breathing continued to get worse, and so I put on a face mask and I used a bag to push oxygen into his lungs. But nevertheless, his heartbeat slowed and slowed and stopped. Why did little Ezekiel die? Why do so many children throughout the low-income world die before even beginning first grade? Now, clearly he had pneumonia, but it was his circumstances that made him at such great risk for that disease. Angola is a nation of great poverty, very poor primary education, very little modern medical care. His illness was just evidence of that. At the outset of the COVID pandemic, there was a lot we didn't understand about the disease, but one fact became clear very quickly. This was a disease that was most likely to kill those who were poor, those who were disabled, those who were minorities, those without good medical care. We also concluded early on that no one would be safe until everyone was safe. Now, this is true of a highly contagious disease, but it's also true of most health problems. No one is safe until everyone is safe, because the circumstances surrounding the person influence whether they will survive or not. Nowhere is this more glaringly obvious than in disasters. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans. It was forecast 5 days in advance to make landfall, and yet when the storm struck, there were still 60,000 people in the city. Who were those 60,000? They were the poor, the disabled, the chronically ill, the most vulnerable people of the city, and almost 2,000 of them perished. So, in retrospect, why was New Orleans such a catastrophe? Well, first of all, it's a city built below sea level. The dikes that guard the city from the ocean were not designed for a full-force hurricane. The evacuation order came less than a day before the hurricane struck, and the emergency response system was based on cell phones. The hurricane took out all those antennas. So 5 years later was the Port-au-Prince earthquake, striking that capital city and instantly killing 300,000 people, the population of Omaha, Nebraska, dead. Made 1 million people homeless, the population of Dallas proper, out on the streets. Doctors Without Borders was there, and they wrote, "This is like working in a war zone. We don't have morphine to manage our patients' pain. We can't accept that airplanes carrying life-saving supplies are being turned away while our patients are dying." Why were the planes being turned away? The airport is very small in Port-au-Prince. It was damaged. It was already filled with airplanes. So in retrospect, why was this such a catastrophic earthquake? Port-au-Prince is filled with very vulnerable people. The emergency response and the medical care system, marginal at best. And most of the construction is from concrete. Now, some of you have experience making concrete. You take sand and gravel and you add cement that holds it all together. Well, when cement is in short supply, it's very tempting to just add a little more sand and gravel. Add some shaking to that, and the whole thing collapses like a dry sandcastle. But in both of these disasters, the response was amazing. Thousands of volunteers within hours were lending assistance. You know, we as a world are fascinated with rescue. I grew up watching MASH, TV series based on an Army medical center during the Korean War. The characters are intriguing and hilarious, but periodically they stop the comedy and they rush to the operating room to save the lives of these soldiers who were injured defending your freedom. We loved MASH. 110 million people tuned in for the final episode. Well, soon thereafter came ER, same kind of TV series but set in America. And then a number of knockoffs. Chicago Med, Grey's Anatomy, even Off the Map, Handsome Medical Missionaries Saving the World. Well, this is all laudable. Outside every medical center in the United States, there's a sign like this. It says, if you have an emergency or you are in labor, you have a right to care at this facility. You cannot be turned away. It doesn't matter whether you have insurance or not, whether you can pay or not. We will care for you. Now, if you have a chronic health condition or you need preventive care, that's not necessarily covered. But if there is an emergency, we've got your back. Now, there's a downside to this emphasis. Rescue is often not successful, often very expensive, and we could also surmise that a predictable, repetitive need to rescue people is short-sighted. So what's happening in this image? People are being directed towards danger, directed towards the cliff, They're predictably falling off, landing on the earth below. But wasn't it thoughtful of someone to put a hospital right there, pronto, ready to provide care for these people? Well, the challenge is to move beyond a disaster rescue mentality to one that builds durability and resilience and strength within individuals and within their entire communities. Metaphorically speaking, to move from building our homes on sandy beaches to building our homes on rock and firm foundation. This is the idea behind the World Health Organization definition of health. It reads a state of complete physical, emotional, social well-being, not just the absence of disease. Now, this is a little utopian sounding, but it's built on the fact that physical health is connected closely with all the other pieces of society. For example, every nation in the world that has a really great economy has a pretty good healthcare system, and vice versa. The question of the night is, what do we do about the world's most vulnerable people? How can we build strength and durability among them? Now, as I say this, we have to remember that there are vulnerable people everywhere. Every major city, no matter the wealth of the country, has got those who are elderly, disabled, non-dominant language speakers, chronically ill. Everything we're talking about is on behalf of those individuals as well. I teach at the Institute for International Medicine, and in my courses, I often refer to the Human Development Index. This was created by the United Nations as a benchmark to measure human well-being, and it measures just three things: physical health, measured by life expectancy; access to knowledge, measured by years of completed education; and standard of living, measured by personal income. Now, the three of these were chosen because they're rather easy to measure, and they also contribute to one another. They rise and they fall together. Let's touch on them one by one. First is access to knowledge. Now, you and I know intuitively that better educated people live longer, have fewer health problems. That's generally true. The actual objective evidence from this comes from the nation of Tanzania in southern Africa. And researchers found that people with just a fourth grade education in any given year were 3 times more likely to die compared with those who had a 10th grade education. Controlling for all the other factors, being educated was protective and life-saving. Now, what can you and I do to promote education in our communities? I constantly urge young parents to read to their children. Early on, help your children develop a fascination with books and with learning and exploring. I urge teenagers to stay in school, do well in school, find some subjects that they're really passionate about, and even consider careers as teachers and educators. At the Kalukim Hospital, we're surrounded by a community that has many adults that cannot read and write. So in the afternoons, we open up our classroom and we invite all the adults in for literacy classes. So they'll spend an hour and a half learning to write the alphabet and to spell their first words and to form sentences. And over a period of months, their confidence grows, their job prospects grow. Adult literacy is part of our comprehensive approach to improving the health of the entire community. The next element of Human Development Index is income, standard of living. Now, poverty is closely related to a myriad of health problems. The very best book on this subject is The End of Poverty by Jeffrey Sachs. And in The End of Poverty, he argues that agrarian societies, first of all, need enough food. They need modern fertilizers, modern seeds, and as food becomes more plentiful, then not everyone has to work in agriculture. They can begin to diversify their economies. They can start businesses, they can do services, they can do manufacturing. What's happening in this image? Who are these people? What are they doing? Some of you have seen this for yourselves. They're waiting for water. Now, there's a lot of children here. Shouldn't these children be in school? And how about these women? Don't they have something more productive to do? The provision of water is important, not just to prevent diarrhea diseases. It's also important for children to go to school, for women to be able to start businesses. In the community surrounding Kalukim Hospital, we've dug deep wells. They go down 100, 200 feet deep, and water pumped out from that level is drinkable. Therefore, our children are in school, our women are starting businesses. It's another piece of our comprehensive approach to improving the health of the entire community. And now the third element, physical health. Now, a variety of interventions will make people's bodies healthier, but our resources are always insufficient. Not enough personnel, not enough money, not enough supplies, and so we have to focus our healthcare interventions. And to do this, we begin by measuring the gravity of various health problems. The measure we use is called the DALY, the D-A-L-Y, the Disability Adjusted Life Year Lost. And the DALY takes into account not only what someone dies from, but how old are they when they die. And so the death of a 3-year-old from pneumonia has much greater weight than the death of an 83-year-old from the same disease. So which are the leading causes of life years lost in the world's 50 poorest countries? Number 1 is pneumonia, followed by diarrhea disease, followed by malaria, and then birth complications. All of these affect children primarily. And then behind each of these diseases, there are risk factors, predecessors, make people more likely to develop the illnesses that kill them. So what are the leading risk factors for death in the world's 50 poorest nations? Number 1 is malnutrition, followed by unsafe drinking water and unsafe sex, hypertension, diabetes. As we intervene and reduce these risk factors, we also lessen the likelihood that someone will develop a lethal disease and die from that as a result. Now, if you start a health project, ideally you'll get to know your community. You'll go door to door, you'll ask people, what are your health concerns, what are your resources, and you'll create a plan that's appropriate for that community. But in broad strokes, in the world's lowest income communities, the most effective interventions are nutrition and breastfeeding, safe drinking water, well child care, vaccinations, management of hypertension and diabetes. Very, very effective. In Angola, we have a lack of health leadership. Physicians, for example, don't have much opportunity to do anything beyond medical school. No residencies, they just go right to work. So we've created a 2-year residency program where they come to us and under the watchful supervision of our faculty, they develop their skill, they develop their vision. The curriculum we use was developed by the Institute for International Medicine. We're a graduate school equipping healthcare professionals and profession students with the unique skills necessary to serve the world's most forgotten people. Our board of directors and our faculty are followers of Christ. We rely on Christ for the security and the vision that we need to live day by day. And we express this through working diligently on behalf of humanity. We offer courses designed to fill the gaps in traditional medical education. For example, courses in tropical diseases and in disaster management. We offer hands-on skills in newborn resuscitation and trauma management. We offer service experiences with our faculty in 25 nations. And our premier offering is the MIH, the Master's Degree in International Health, which takes those elements and adds epidemiology and scholarly research. It's a credential that shows one not only has a good heart, but has backed it up with diligent study and qualification. back at the Caloocan Hospital, one of our young resident physicians came to me and he asked if I would examine a patient with him. So we went to the ward and he introduced me to Antonio, a 4-year-old boy. Antonio had been coughing and had fever. And so I examined the child and I confirmed his diagnosis of pneumonia. And so I turned to the young doctor and I said, "How are you treating him?" And he replied, "Well, hours ago I gave him his IV antibiotic and I gave him oxygen, but he's better now and he doesn't need it. And I gave him prednisone to treat his wheezing." "Well done," I said. And then I looked around the room. There was his father. His father was in our literacy class. And his mother, she's a merchant in the marketplace. Little Antonio survived. His parents were educated. They had some income. He got prompt, good medical care. He's an example of the advantages that occur when we build strength within societies. And that is the challenge, to move away from focusing on disaster and rescue to strength and durability. It is true, no one will be safe until everyone is safe. Join me in working diligently to make everyone safe.
An inspiring and very practical word from Dr. Nicholas Kamenelis. He's actually going to be joining us here at the broadcast table in just a second, but we'd love to hear from you. There's still time for you to get your question in. Wherever you're streaming M3 tonight, send your question in. We'll have him here for the next couple of minutes. In fact, for all of our speakers tonight, you have the opportunity to do that. You can actually send your questions in while they're speaking. You don't have to wait till the very end, but there's still time. We encourage you also to share M3 on your social media. We have a hashtag M3 Missions 2020. So make sure you hashtag, send a link to a friend, let them know whatever social media you happen to be viewing on. And then after this weekend, direct friends to an event on demand. We'll actually have it on the M3 YouTube channel as well. We have Dr. Nicholas Kamenelis here with us in the broadcast desk. Welcome, and it's good to have you here.
Pleasure.
Go ahead, Jeff, go ahead.
We have a couple of questions that have already come in. Doctor, I want to, by the way, I do want to say you have a great presentation. You're very, very good at that. A couple of questions that have come in from some of our viewers already tonight, and that is, let's see, it looks like Angela, who's watching at m3missions.com. Are there any opportunities to work under your ministry and what you're doing and the things that you're involved in to serve the underserved?
Certainly. The wonderful thing that I have enjoyed is the opportunity to meet people who have a really compassionate heart for humanity, who want to step out and do something bold. And certainly my organization, InMed, can provide especially opportunities that are integrated with education, along with the other wonderful ministries connected with M3.
And what's the easiest way to connect with you then on those things?
So start with the website.
Okay.
It's InMed, INMED.us.
And Jennifer, I assume we have links to him and all of our speakers tonight at m3missions.com too.
We do.
Another question, Doctor. You spoke about how disaster impacts the vulnerable the most, the poor, the weak, ill, the homeless. That actually describes people that Jesus commands us to reach. Why do you think it is so challenging to get people of faith to get involved, specifically in disaster relief?
I think that people may be concerned about being overwhelmed, being stretched beyond their capacity, being asked to do things that are outside of their comfort zone. But that's part of the adventure of it all, is taking a step of faith and volunteering for either disaster relief. If you're interested in doing disaster relief, I would say start early and connect yourself with an organization so that you get the training, the qualification, the orientation, so that you're ready to deploy when that opportunity may come.
Do you think, kind of as we're sort of moving into post-pandemic times, do you think the opportunities are going to be greater, or the need is going to be greater, or maybe both?
Probably both.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about disaster management is that we need to be constantly preparing and upgrading our skills so that when it does appear, we're ready to respond.
I think a lot of us who aren't really in medical missions or disaster relief, kinds of work, I think a lot of us are sometimes afraid because we may not have a particular skill set, especially for somebody like me. I'm not in the medical field, but there might be practical ways that I can help. Is that true with the work that you're doing?
Certainly, yeah, that's certainly
Do you
true.
need carpenters and people that can do things like that?
Right.
Just practically speaking.
I tell people the most important qualification is a willing spirit. If you come with a willing spirit, we will very likely find a good role for you.
Chuck, I think sometimes people don't get involved with disaster relief or missions in general, as far as medical missions, because they don't know outlets. They don't have any idea how to do that. That's one of the things about M3 is we give you some practical ways to organizations that are doing the work.
There was only a conference that could help do that, right?
Exactly. But practical, organizations with practical opportunities for people to be involved.
Yeah.
All over the website.
And I want to encourage you to go to the m3missions.com website. There are so many tools and resources right there for you. Click the tabs, go through that. You will find an opportunity, I can promise you. Well, Dr. Kamenelis, thank you so much. M3 supports you and your efforts as you continue to do the work that God has called you to do as well.
Nicholas, I just wanted to comment. I thought it was a brilliant presentation. There's many people in the audience that can, will agree with what your assessment was. But we see in the places that Jen and I work very often that the parents won't even name a child until they're 5 years of age because there's just a high likelihood that they won't survive. So I loved your approach to, it's not just rescuing people. It's sustainable efforts to change a community through education, through all the things that you mentioned. So I thought it was a brilliant presentation. Rich Stearns, who was president of the World Vision for a long time, I was having a conversation with him one time, and he said, the issue of poverty is rocket science. What he was saying, it's a complex, multi-layered, multifaceted problem, and we can't just be rescuing people. So I appreciate your approach to let's look at sustainable, durable efforts that can change a whole community. So beautifully done.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah.
That is so good. Thank you again for being here. Most individuals in the M3 community serve full-time or part-time around the world, and yet there are many ways to serve locally right in your own community with refugee care as an emerging need and a possible outreach for you right in your own backyard is now global. Dr. Paul and Jennifer, would you guys take a minute and tell us a little bit about the efforts that the two of you are doing in this area?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, Jen's been really involved in this for the last couple of years, and she's passionate about refugee care here in Houston. And, one of the things that it's been obvious to me, I've helped her a little bit, but she's been really the one at the forefront of doing this in our family, really at our church. But, Chuck, we're talking about M3 is going to the world, but we need to realize the world has come to us. And we're in a position right now where there are refugees streaming to the United States from all over the world. And these are missionary opportunities. You don't have to go to the world's come to us. Jen, tell us a little bit about the refugee situation now in the world.
Well, there are an estimated 82 million refugees and displaced people around the world right now. And they're displaced for a number of reasons: war, violence, persecution, other emergencies. But everyday people around the world make the difficult decision to leave their countries, their homes, jobs, and many times their families in search of safety and a better life. For example, in the last 6 months, the United States has welcomed over 74,000 Afghans who were forced to flee Afghanistan. Some had to leave because they worked alongside the U.S., and some were human rights or political activists.
What's it like for a family to be resettled in the United States? When they've left everything, what's it like to be resettled here?
Yeah. So the resettling process is very difficult. The families have left their homes, their jobs, and their loved ones, but they face challenges such as finding housing here, jobs, They want to support their families. They need to enroll their children in school, and many of them speak limited or no English. So there's a language barrier, there's a culture barrier. They need help with simple things like going to the grocery store, things that require a car, internet to job search, things that we often take for granted. Just integrating into the American culture is a challenge because their culture is so different. Navigating all the different systems in America, especially healthcare. And this is at a time, especially after COVID, when everything's backlogged with so many people trying to access the help all at once.
You've worked with a lot of families, but can you tell us just one story?
I can. So for the last 5 years, I have volunteered with several organizations locally, and I've worked alongside a lot of families who have resettled here. I've seen the difficulties that they face firsthand, but particularly a family that I've worked with since, I guess, August, and I've changed their names to protect them, but Mohammed and Mina arrived with their 2 children. And Mohammed worked alongside the U.S. forces, and Marina was 6 months pregnant when they arrived. They fled Afghanistan with just the clothes on their back. And I served with a small team that set up their apartment. We helped drive Mina to her doctor's appointments, navigate the insurance, and basically just get them ready for a new baby. Neither of them speaks English, so you can imagine how difficult these first few months have been for them. We had the honor of being with her at the hospital as her new baby was born. We helped register their children in school, and we even helped Mohammed look for a job. But we also experienced firsthand their friendship and their hospitality. Almost every time we visit them, they have chai or they have a meal for us. They've become, honestly, just like family.
Yeah, it's just amazing, their incredible hospitality. So how can people that, be involved with this? If they live in Des Moines, Iowa, or if they live in Detroit, or if they live somewhere, how can they be involved?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there are always ways you can help right where you are, and you can find organizations that are helping refugees in your city or your state. Obviously, just going online, the UN has a list of those. There are only 3 states in all of the U.S. that did not receive refugees.
That's amazing.
So it's a problem. Many organizations will have Amazon wish list, or you can directly donate items that are needed for the resettlement process, like home items, backpacks, school supplies, diapers, baby items, or you can volunteer your time. Families need a network of friends and community to help them and encourage them, and this will go on for months. This isn't just a quick fix. There's going to be ongoing needs for mentors and tutors and job training and language study, you name it. These are our neighbors, and I like to remember Jesus' words in Matthew 25. I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And Jesus cares about the refugees and those who are displaced, and it's just an honor to make them feel welcomed and cared for.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I applaud you, and just remember, the world's come to us. We may not be able to go to Afghanistan, but Afghanistan has come to us. We talk a lot about going in the world, but we need to remember the world has come to us. The global community is in our own backyard, and people need your help. So I would just encourage you don't have to go to Africa to make a difference. You can make a difference right where you live.
And Jennifer, I assume at our website, m3missions.com, there's information on exactly how to do that, right?
There are some local refugee organizations that work right here in Houston, but like I said, they're all over.
None of us have an excuse to not do anything. I mean, really, at the end of the day, there's opportunity for all of us. Well, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Dr. Paul. We appreciate it. A significant part of the reason that we all look to you as our leaders and our role models in medical missions is because of what we just heard, your hearts for this kind of issue. So thank you guys so much. If you want to get involved with refugee care, M3 actually encourages you to do your research on your own community. Find out who is effectively assisting refugees in your area. Take the time to volunteer. You won't regret it, I promise. And you just might make all the difference in the life of another. Our next speakers have a long list of academic accolades and accomplishments to their names, but are coming to us today primarily as the parents of a missionary family to the jungles of Africa, sharing their experience and wisdom in raising children on the mission field, something I know a lot of us have questions about. Would you please welcome Dr. Keir and Joanna Thielander.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. I'm Keir, this is Joanna. We're thrilled to be able to share with you this evening about our experience in Africa, in the jungles of Gabon, and how our family, really a family in a foreign land, and what that looked like. And to get us kicked off and to kind of give you a little bit of a background about who the Thielanders are, or who we were, who we're becoming, Joanna's got a poem for you. Joanna.
I wrote a poem for you today to tell our life story of our missionary lives and to give God the glory. Keir and I were raised in churches where missions was a focus. I grew up in Rochester, New York, and Keir grew up in Indianapolis. We met in Indiana while in college at Purdue. We met in Purdue's handbell choir. You can laugh, but it's true. Engineers is what we both are by training. We are logical, practical. Engineers don't need much explaining. Caring for people, not computers, that is Keir's heart. So medical school was the next place to start. We moved to Indianapolis for medical school for 4 years. Surgery became something Keir loved. He made that very clear. After medical school to Cleveland, we moved for 7 years. In 2002, our son Luke was born, another engineer. God blessed us with Sarah 2 years after that. She is girly and fun and quite a creative cat. A boy and a girl, our family is complete. Now, where does God want us to plant our feet? Keir asked God, where should I teach? Whom should I reach? Or maybe someday, do you want me to preach? I read an email in our home the fall of 2003. The first line of the email seemed a bit strange to me. It read, if I were a surgeon, I would go. They needed a surgeon to help in Bungalow. I read the email with zeal, and a minute I did not waste. I paged Keir right away. He called me back in haste. How would you like to go to Africa? I said. Silence fell. Keir did not know what I had just read. We prayed about serving in Bungalow Hospital for 1 year. It really didn't make sense for 2 engineers. God, why would you call us to go so far away? We have no missionaries in our family anyway. And we don't like camping or caving or nature too much. With the heat and the spiders that we don't want to touch? What about our kids in the rainforest? How will they do? God, we can take a little risk, but really? You want us to live in the zoo? Couldn't we stay right here in Cleveland and send money overseas? Couldn't we go every year for 2 weeks? Wouldn't that meet more needs? And God, we're 31. A bit late to be called into missions, don't you think? But if you had called us as kids, we'd gladly serve overseas. Wink, wink. I'm a social person, so are there extroverts way over there? It's foreign, it's dangerous, and who will cut my hair? Our questions of why turned into why not? Perhaps God had equipped us, believe it or not. We both took French in high school. That's the language of Gabon. So we'll have bonjour and merci to build upon. Be strong and courageous, God said to us. You can do this jungle life. You just need to trust. In 2005, we said a tearful goodbye to France for language school, then to Gabon we would fly. Everything familiar was now left behind. On an adventure with God, that's the best kind. God reminded us of his promise to Joshua that is so true. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Keir trained Christian African surgeons in the operating room, and we studied the Bible with the residents and their spouses right in our living room. I homeschooled Luke and Sarah, and we discovered rich treasures in Gabon. Our kids have an expansive worldview and appreciate diversity, a true testimony to the rock that they stand on. After 10 years of tropical flowers and gazing up at star-filled skies, the Good Shepherd led us back to this country, broadening our ministry eyes. 5 years ago, before moving back to the U.S., we asked God the same questions, since this is his business. God, are you sure you want us to go way over there? The U.S. is foreign now and dangerous, and who will cut my hair? Today, Luke's a college freshman, and Sarah's high school graduation is this May. To God be the glory. Lord, lead us and lead you, we pray.
Thanks, Joanna. Pretty amazing. I may be a little biased, but I think she's amazing. And maybe you caught the theme of her poem in our story, and I think it's probably similar for you as well. There's tension. There's trade-offs, there's challenges. And so for us, this family in a foreign land is really about how do you live in the tension. You're going to have it. In fact, I would suggest to you that you're living in tension right now. And whether you stay here, whether that's the United States or wherever here is for you, maybe it's Congo, maybe it's Guinea, wherever you stay, there will be tension. But it's the tension we're used to. That's what we know as a family. We know where to turn when we have challenges. It's our home culture. But when you're a family in a foreign land, it's not your home culture anymore. The tensions are different, and we need to adjust. Not only are the tensions different, but the places we turn should also be different, where we find solutions to those tensions or how we learn to live within those tensions. But it's an amazing life also living overseas. In fact, one of the major benefits for us was time together as a family. And in fact, you recently got a note from a friend, right? Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell us about that note, Joanna?
So we have friends that are both physicians, and they've served overseas in Africa for 2 years, and they're back here in the States now for a year. And she wrote me a letter just last week, and 2 lines of the letter were super interesting and a great reminder for us. She writes, "Our second year overseas was difficult, but also very rewarding." And then she goes on to say, "We are all looking forward to going back to Africa, where despite the different stresses that we experience there, we actually are together as a family a lot more." And she underlined a lot more.
I think that was also an example for us, or a reminder. That was our experience as well. It was a different rhythm. In each place that you may go, there's a different rhythm. And if you want to live within that rhythm, you see what the other people are doing. And you watch them and you do that. Otherwise, you're going to take your tensions from where you came and encounter new tensions and try to handle them all at once. And those tensions in that level are just very difficult to overcome. For us, what did that extra family time, we'll call it extra family time, look like? So for me, I came home for lunch. I don't know many surgeons who come home for lunch almost every day, at least not many that I know that live in the United States. It might have only been 10 minutes, but it was 10 minutes of touching base with my family, saying hi to the kids, and just making a little contact point. Or if a day ended early, maybe I would get home and say, hey kids, do you want to go to the pool? Okay, we call it a pool. You might have called it just a hole in the ground, but I think it was a pool. We went to the pool. Our kids thought it was a pool. Or the tennis court that, well, maybe it was just a slab of concrete, but it was the size of a tennis court, or some other activity that we could do. Time to be with my kids in ways that I would never have had here. Or I could invite Luke along, our son, when we were going to do some other project, like fixing the internet problems, or maybe we needed to take a look at the generator. Not that I knew anything about generators, but a second set of eyes is never hurts from the maintenance guy to ask when he asks you. So you can involve your kids in those things in ways that you just can't do here in the United States or wherever you may be. Tension. You're going to live in it. Will it be here or will it be there? And sometimes the tension that we live with here is often external. So we learn to say, at least in the United States, we learn to say no. I'm too busy, I have too many things going on. It's pressures from the outside. When you move overseas, a lot of those tensions are now internal tensions. We feel that pressure to do more things because there's always something to do and yet nothing to do all at once. For us in the jungle, there was no place to go, but there was always some work to be done. Could I say no to that feeling of, oh, I need to do some work? We were confronted with this one night, actually by our kids. Joanna, you want to tell them about that?
Sure. Both Kier and I were busy working on our computers. I was overseeing the visitor ministry, so emailing people who were coming on a short-term trip. Kier was taking care of a lot of other emails, and we were both on our computers. One of our kids walks into our office and says, oh, Mommy, Daddy, you're busy again. You're writing emails. And then they left the room, and we thought, you know, they're making a really good point, and we were far too busy on our computers answering these emails when in reality, the email could wait till tomorrow. It could wait till the following week. But at the time, we felt like we had to get those done right then. And it was a wake-up call for us. And we really then restructured and reprioritized and said, we can answer some emails, but then we need to put that on hold, spend some time with the kids, play with them, be a family, and enjoy the family time together.
Yeah, and I think that's the example as I was trying to help us all understand or be reminded of that those tensions were from within. No one else was telling me I needed to answer emails that night. I felt that pressure for whatever I thought I needed to do. But God gave us another option, and he spoke through our kids, which he so often does if we're willing to listen. And thankfully, in that case, we did listen. Can't say I always have, but in that case, we did. There's another tension that we have, and that is what's going to happen to our kids. Have we kind of messed them up by living in the jungle? Like maybe they're going to be socially, like they're just not going to get it. Like did we take them out of their own like growing up culture, so they're third culture kids, and what have we done? And I think that's probably how we all feel, whether you've taken your kids over to another culture or you're going to, or if you're in your home culture, am I doing the right thing as a parent? It's a tension we live in. I think there's a great quote from a guy who wrote the book, Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And what he says is, don't worry that that's your children, that they aren't listening to you. Worry that they are always watching you. And what were our kids watching us do that evening? They were watching us write emails. Is that the message we wanted to send to them? So we wondered when we moved back, how are our kids going to do? What did they think about having grown up in the jungle now that they've been back in the States? And Joanna's had a couple conversations with them. You want to tell us a bit about those conversations?
Sure. So I talked to our daughter, Sarah, and asked her, what was your perspective? Because as adults and mom and dad, we have one view of life in the jungle, but you were raised there from ages 2 to 12. You were growing up there. So what was that like? And she said, well, that was all that I knew, and it was normal for me. So for her, growing up in the jungle was a normal thing. And then our son, Luke, and I got into just a real casual conversation one night, maybe about 8-9 months ago. And he said, Mom, I know that life in Gabon for you and Dad was very different from your childhood and from anything that you had planned for. But for Sarah and I, we called it home, and generally speaking, I had a blast there. And it was so, there were tears in my eyes when he told me, and I said, Luke, I appreciate you telling me how wonderful your childhood was, and that generally speaking, you had a blast there. So many great things from our kids have come from their 10 years in the jungle.
We've heard from a number of our colleagues, some of those who are a bit older, say raising children on the mission field is amazing. It's the best thing that you can do for your kids. We doubted. We weren't quite sure, was that really true? And I think these words from our son, unsolicited, he just brought that up one evening. I think drive home the reality of that it is a wonderful place to raise kids. Now, everybody's situation is different. Our mission field was the middle of nowhere in the jungle, legitimately. If you want to go there, it just takes a long time to get there, but I would take you there. But that's not true for everyone. Yet your kids are looking at you and they will watch how you handle these things, whether you're here in the United States where we are now, or whether you're overseas somewhere. Your children are watching. So how do we help ourselves stay on track? One of the ways we did that is we sought out mentors. I mentioned some older missionaries that had talked about them raising kids and how that was great. They thought it was wonderful to raise kids. But we had a local mentor, someone who could teach us the culture, and not just the culture of like, how do I act as a physician, but the culture of how do you act as a family? What does that look like in their culture, whatever their culture is? And how do we integrate into that? And as I mentioned, how do we live in the tension and look for the solutions to the tensions in that culture rather than taking all of our tensions, plus the things we think we want to do from our home culture, into a new culture which has all of its own tensions. So the theme here of a family being in a foreign land is about living within that tension. God gives you the strength to do it. He gave us the strength to do it. And if we can do it, anybody can do it. I can tell you that. If we can live in the middle of the jungle, anybody can do that. Just a few other things that we were able to do, and I would say that Joanna is really the driver of this. She makes everything fun. Everything is fun. And so to take that perspective, to embrace wherever you are, to say, what is positive about this place? What can we do here? We went to a place called the Bongolo Water Park. I don't know if you have that picture and can put that up. We called it the Bongolo Water Park. You may look at it and say, I think that's just a river. But it was a water park to our kids. It was a blast. We had Butterfly Paradise that we called and went there as another little stream. We watched driver ants on the road sometimes. We took advantage of the opportunities that the Lord provided us living in that environment. There's another recent story that we had about raising kids that we talked about with some friends when they were over, of our kids' friends. So you want to tell that one? And
Sure. So we were working a puzzle the other day, just a few weeks ago, and some new friends came and started working the puzzle with us, and they said, so tell us about living in the jungle, and how was it like, and what was it like, you know, for the kids, and how did that parenting go? And I thought for a minute, how do you describe this super different kind of place, this mission station, and our kids were able to just go and be free? And I said, well, I think the closest thing would be, we would call it free-range kids. And I said, you've heard of free-range chickens? Well, we had 2 free-range kids who just could walk out the door, throw their flip-flops on, and just go. And so there they were, Luke and Sarah, just running to different missionaries' houses, running down to the hospital, running here, running there. And we had 2 wonderful free-range kids.
yeah, and I thought maybe that sums it up. We had free-range kids in the middle of the jungle. I don't know that we have many free-range kids today anymore. We have kids on phones. We have kids sitting playing computer games. But free-range kids, it was amazing. So that tension got translated to an opportunity to engage our children and ourselves and grow our marriage. Our marriage has never been the same, and that's good. It's better than it was ever been in 10 years in the jungle. Joanna's going to wrap us up with another poem. Just tells a little bit more, maybe challenges you a little bit, some things to think about as you consider whether God is calling you as a missionary family to be a family in a foreign land.
So now you've heard a bit about us. It's time to talk about you and it's time to discuss. Do you like to read but don't know where to start? Read Love Does and be inspired by Bob Goff's Big Heart. Do you want to capture your purpose and rediscover your joy today? Get a copy of his new book, Undistracted. You can get it right away. Instead of asking the whys, ask God, what now? He blesses those who follow him, and he'll always show you how. Since Jesus is always with us and we are never alone, what is he saying to you? Perhaps it's your time to roam. M3 stands for Mobilizing Medical Missions, as you know. We're praying that God would show you exactly where to go. So what questions might we answer to help you on your journey? Ask about our jungle pets or the story of runaway gurneys. Take the next step with God. He'll always see you through. Today, God is calling. And where is he calling you?
Thank you so much, Dr. Keir and Joanna Thielander. They're actually about to have a nice sit down with Dr. Paul and Jennifer Osteen with a really in-depth discussion, but there's actually an opportunity for you to get involved as well. Don't forget, send in your questions. If you have a question for the Thielanders, maybe you've been considering getting you and your family involved in missions overseas, well, just let us know. Wherever you're watching us from, you can get the information to us in the Q&A section, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, however you'd like to do. We definitely want to hear from you, especially other families on the mission field. Want to give a quick shout out to some of those that are viewing, but actually if you can see, well, they were behind me. No, they're not. We have viewers from all over. Want to give a shout out to Vandy in Sierra Leone, actually watching us tonight or this morning. Anir's in Miami, Florida. Musha is in Abuja, Nigeria. Kashalia in the Republic of Mauritius. I think, okay, there they are behind him. Hello, everybody. Wave. Good to see you guys. And you can join us however, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, just make sure you get your question in right away to us and we'll try to get it. I'll start with one that we have for the Thielanders. You both talk about the tension and the trade-offs that are part of the reality of living in a foreign land. I would imagine those tensions and trade-offs were also extremely character building. What are some of the positive traits you see in your children that you think are a result of growing up overseas?
It's a great question, Chuck. I think one of the things that I see in both of our kids, and they're very different. One's an engineer, no question, that's how he thinks, maybe a little square. And our other, Sarah's quite creative. One of the positive things that I see in both of them is a willingness to adapt and understand others' perspectives. They are able to quickly engage in a community or in a group of people and feel, I think, comfortable. They look like they're comfortable, and that's not true for everyone. They're also quite comfortable speaking with adults, also speaking with younger kids, and so they have this ability to take the age ranges as well as the setting ranges and really plug in and feel comfortable.
I love that. Yeah. Go ahead, Jen. I think we would say the same. You know, we've had our children for long periods of time, and certainly I would say they're adaptable. You know, I remember, I love that you addressed this in your poem, Joanna, but I remember the first couple of times we took our children overseas, and when we come back, people would be so in awe that I would put them in danger like that. And so, how did you approach people? Because you said you were surprised yourself, you were going on the mission field, right? So what were your friends and your family like? How did you handle explaining to them the call that God had put on your life and taking your family like that? Because I'm sure that was a surprise to a lot of people, as it was to you, right? Yeah.
I think, I mean, this might sound trite, but we just said this is what God has called us to do. And we had loads of people here in the U.S. praying for us and cheering us on and saying, we will hold the ropes for you here. And by God's grace, we were protected from all kinds of scary snake bites and other things that could have taken place there in the middle of the jungle where we were.
Sure. It is dangerous, right? But it's worth the risk, right? To follow what God's called us to do.
You know, Kira, you mentioned this in your talk, but I want you to elaborate a little bit more because you've experienced tension on both sides. Both there, the tension, you know, overwhelming need, never having sleep sometimes. How do you do it with your family? You know, you're isolated from other people. You don't have help when you need it. But you've also had tension here. You practice surgery some now here, and because a lot of people can relate to tension. How do you deal with it here?
Yeah, so it's I think probably the way that we can look at tension, and I'll take this maybe just out of the professional realm just for a moment and back it up, and that tension resulted in us feeling like we weren't home in Gabon. It also reminded us when we came back here, this doesn't feel like home anymore either. And so dealing with that tension, part of it is having that eternal perspective, and I don't mean to like be too spiritual here, but it's true that we ultimately remember that our ultimate home is in heaven. And so handling that on a broad scale, I would say is that big picture of saying home is in heaven, and this isn't home. On a more day-to-day scale, it's keeping the eye on that prize that God has called us to. And there may be things in my position, what I'm doing with PACS now, that are challenging to be here. There may be things that are challenging in the hospital where I'm working, but I know that God has called me to a specific mission. And if I can be reminded of, okay, this is why I'm here, this is what I'm doing. It's about discipling, it's about training. That's why I'm here, it's what I'm doing. Coming back to that calling.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. How has it changed your kids' worldview?
Yeah, so you want me to go?
Sure.
Okay. I would say one of the aspects for them is they seek out a diverse experience. They're looking for that. They're not afraid of it. They're not forcing it either, but they welcome it. I think from a world perspective, it's been a little bit of a challenge for them to be back in the States where a lot of teenagers are thinking about what their next shoes they need to buy are or whether they have the right genes or not. And that's not true for either of our kids. And I think from a world perspective, they can say, yeah, I've seen need. And I know what it looks like. And some of these things look like need. Some of these things people say are need, they're not needs. They're wants.
You know, you mentioned that your kids are always watching you. How do you think they'll reflect one day on a mom and dad who took big risks for the kingdom?
Say that again?
How do you think they'll reflect one day on a mom and a dad who took big risks for the kingdom of God?
Yeah, do you want to?
I think our prayer is that they would hopefully also say, well, my mom and dad did this.
Absolutely.
I can do this too. And I really, we see that they're 17 and 19 now, and we see that in them, that willingness to obey and to trust the Lord for whatever their journey may be, understanding that there's sacrifice along the way. They may end up in Africa, they may stay in Ohio. We don't know, that's a God thing. But I think that they've seen it lived out in a very up close and personal way, and we pray and believe and are trusting that will have big impact for their future and what God has for them.
You know, we often tell our kids, if we've modeled a comfortable Christianity to you, we've not modeled the right Christianity. So I admire what you guys have done and are doing. And you know, a little bit off the subject, but I'm a big fan of PACS, and you got to give us 2 minutes on what PACS is.
Yeah, great, happy to do it. So now my full-time role back here in the States is to oversee surgical training and discipleship program. That's what I was a part of in Gabon. There's now 12 sites that we have that we do training, 123 residents, and it's training African physicians to become surgeons and fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. So they're Christians when they come to us, and those Christians that I trained, I think taught me more about Christianity than I taught them about Christianity. I learned a lot from those men and women that I worked with. But it's a training and discipleship program, surgery, throughout, like I mentioned, 12 different sites, 9 different countries across Africa, one in Egypt and then sub-Saharan Africa.
So you've trained almost 300, are training or have trained almost 300 surgeons.
Yeah, that's right. So 123 in training and 126, so close to that 300 number that have graduated. And they're across Africa, 21 different countries, God is using them in crazy, immense, huge ways for the kingdom.
And we've had a couple of them speak here. Agneta Odura spoke here, and Jacques spoke as well. So, Chuck, I think you have a question?
Yeah, in fact, we have a couple, and they're a little bit related, actually. One, it says, in the U.S., we're obsessed with safety for obvious reasons and for good reason. How do you respond to people who ask about raising kids overseas when they ask the question, is it safe?
Go ahead.
No.
Right?
But is life safe? Right? The only thing we know is that we're eventually going to die. That we know. We're going to physically leave this earth. And so the question isn't, is it, I understand the question, and I don't want to downplay the question of is it safe. But I will say that the risks are different, much like the tensions are different. We didn't have risks that our kids were going to get into things at school because they weren't going to a school at that time. They were homeschooled. We didn't have risks about the culture. There wasn't internet risks. There weren't things that they were going to get exposed to. So the risks are different, and you have to address those risks appropriately. Did we let them go out? Yes. I think our daughter ran into more snakes than the rest of the family put together. I don't know why that was. By herself, yes, by herself. But God protected her through all of those times where she was exposed or at risk with a snake right in front of her. And as we say in Gabon, we think they're all poisonous, but it doesn't really matter because they all can have a machete that takes care of them. And so that's the approach. So in terms of risks and safety, I don't think God calls us to safety. He calls us to do something, and it's not often to be safe. That's often us wanting to be what we think is safe.
Yeah. I think, and this is a little bit of a follow-up, it actually comes from one of our audience members right here with us tonight. What was actually the hardest thing for your kids when you actually made that move? Were there obvious challenges for some or all of your kids?
Moving to Gabon or moving back? Because for us, they both were challenges.
Well, both. Actually, maybe talk about both because there are different challenges. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say moving there, they were so young, they were 2 and 4. As Sarah said, that was just normal for them and they didn't know anything else. So they were just raised in this hot, humid, beautiful, dangerous tropical jungle, and again, that was normal for them. We did come back and raise support and speak at different churches here in the States. They got a little taste of things that they were maybe missing out on, but then they were ready to get back to house 4 in the middle of the jungle. We all were, and be a family again and do the ministry that God had called us to do. And then moving from Gabon to the U.S., I don't even know where to begin. There were a lot of challenges and just everything was overwhelming, I would say, for the kids and for us. And nothing felt normal or familiar at that time. School was a big school, backpacks, lockers, teachers. There was just a lot of nuances that were, and most people don't know where Gabon is, so that was also a story. Oh, where did you move from? Oh, we moved from Gabon. Oh, they didn't know it was even in Africa, and that's normal. But so that engaging kind of relationship, they couldn't say, well, I just moved here from Houston, or I moved from Pittsburgh. They couldn't say that because they moved from Gabon.
Yeah.
I think I would add, just in moving to Africa, one of the things that was a challenge was just a bit of loneliness for us and for the kids. In some ways that was a tension, but then became a positive because we become a close family. And so we spent lots of time together. We were our kids' playmates, as well as their parents, their disciplinarians, you name it, that's what we were for them. And there are a variety of reasons for that. But in our situation, that's what it was. And so I think the fear or concern about were they going to be lonely, or maybe they were lonely at times, maybe they didn't know it, but they were. And so we could fill those gaps. That becomes a challenge as parents, but it also puts you so tight together as a family, things that we really cherish today.
Yeah, maybe time for one more question for you both. And by the way, this is from Emily. She said, your talk was so good and it was so encouraging. She said, can you give some encouragement for young married couples or maybe even students that are watching tonight to say yes to God early?
I can say the encouragement would be give it a try, give it a whirl. There's a lot of ways to engage in a 2-month trip, a 2-year trip. You don't have to commit for a lifetime, but it's worth the try. It's worth the risk. And today with internet, with travel, things are a lot easier than they were 50 years ago when there wasn't that easy access to internet and travel. So go for it and pray along the way, get wise mentors, as Keir mentioned already, but really that group here in the US that can support you in prayer, can email you, can Skype or WhatsApp with you is critical to the success and the foundation and the rootedness that you can feel when you do go overseas.
I would just add a couple of things to that. One would be start now. It's never too early. You can't start the journey too early. So start seeking out people now that are on that journey. And then along your journey, God will open the doors and prevent yourself from making decisions that will hinder you from accomplishing what you think God's called you to. So if you've called overseas, probably buying a house is a bad idea. Maybe not, but usually something like that that's going to tie you down. Or if you're in a relationship and God's called you overseas and your maybe future spouse says, I would never go overseas, you need to say, Lord, where am I supposed to go with this? So don't make decisions that will prevent you. There's a lot of other ways to make decisions that leave the doors open.
So good.
Dr. Paul, Jennifer, anything else from you before we let them?
That was very insightful. Thank you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Incredible. Thank you again, Dr. Keir and Joanna Thielander, your story. Such an inspiration to all of us. Many of you out there watching right now have your own transformation stories, and we want to hear from you. Ways God that has brought you out of the mission field, ways that God has used you to transform others, and obviously your own story of your own transformation. Well, we definitely want to hear your story, which will encourage others. So write it out. It's so simple. Just send us an email, info@m3missions.com. Your story may be the very thing that inspires someone else to follow God's mission for them. It'd be very cool. One of the things we do every year at M3 is choose an organization to support financially as our project of the year. And this year, we were able to make incredible $15,000 contribution to the Good Shepherd Health Initiative. This is a ministry that is providing health care and the love and hope found in Jesus to the most vulnerable and underserved people in India. They have health centers in 19 states. They impact over 400,000 patients every year. Good Shepherd is run by Dr. Beryl D'Souza, an amazing woman making a profound impact in her country. Dr. Beryl is on the line with us right now from India. Hello.
Hello, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Beryl, this is Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Good, thank you. In 2 minutes, tell us about Good Shepherd Health Initiative.
Good Shepherd Health Initiative is now in its second decade of providing healthcare to rural communities across India, along with a social justice movement of impacting women and girls from various forms of exploitation, including sex trafficking. Very few people in healthcare understand the link between lack of healthcare resources, a system where people have to pay out of pocket, and the risk of a girl's life. Or very often a child has to be sold into various forms of slavery in order for a family to access health. So Good Shepherd has been working on the ground and providing rural health opportunities through small clinics, community health workers, and now virtual health centers in ensuring that every vulnerable family has access to good health, and also in line with sustainable development goals of ending hunger and gender discrimination. Again, being the arms and feet of Christ in that.
Yeah. Wonderful. Dr. Beryl, how has COVID impacted your ministry over the last 2 years?
Well, COVID, we thought we were doing a lot of work and it was good work, and then COVID made us realize how hard it has been. The pandemic created havoc. The first wave, we saw the huge migration of a large population of Indian migrant workers across the country left stranded overnight, dying not of COVID, but of, exhaustion deaths and starvation, things like that. And then the second wave where people were just gasping for oxygen, and again, the lack of resources, people dying in rural communities. It really exemplified the huge gap we have between the rich and the poor, between those who have access to health and not health, and sort of escalated our efforts into providing rural health care. So with the gift that we received from M3 and the kind folks at Lakewood, we were able to scale up our work from 20 virtual centers to 50 virtual centers and sort of double the number of people we are trying to help.
That's amazing, Beryl. Well, listen, we're so honored to honor you this year with our Project of the Year. And Beryl, I wanted to say something to you personally, that we know the last couple of years has been hard for you with COVID and the other issues that you face, and we know those other issues that you faced. And we wanted to take a moment and encourage you, to thank you for your faithfulness, not for giving up in the face of adversity, for continuing to do what you can do to help the world's most vulnerable there in India. You're an inspiration to all of us. We applaud you. We honor you. Keep up the good work, and may God richly bless you.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.
An amazing ministry. Yeah, for sure. You can find out more about the Good Shepherd Clinic and Dr. Beryl D'Souza on the M3 website. Just click on the Project of the Year tab, and you'll find out a little bit more information about that. I want to give a couple of shout outs before we move on. Sanjeev and Vaishali, they're viewing us tonight in South Carolina. Hello, thank you for joining us. Maria in Mexico, John's in Canada, Jacob's in Atlanta, Georgia. I love, Dr. Paul and Jennifer, that M3 impacts every part of the globe. And we see our friends that are joining us via Zoom and other medium tonight as well. So it's just incredible. Well, we ask you, before we introduce our keynote speaker tonight, make sure you let your friends and family know that they can still tune in. We'd love to have them join us. Share it on social media, whether it's a link that you're watching right now, or you can direct them to your own social community and go to m3missions.com. You can share that link as well. Don't forget, submit your questions for our keynote speaker, Bob Goff. He's coming in just a second, but we'll have a Q&A section with Bob directly after he gets done speaking. So it is my pleasure to now introduce our keynote speaker. He is a New York Times best-selling author and celebrated speaker. His new book, Undistracted, coming out on March the 1st. Please welcome back to M3, Bob Goff.
Hey everybody, it's Bob Goff here. I am so delighted to be with you. This has been so fun to listen to the stories. Matthew 13, it said that Jesus never spoke to anybody without telling them a story. And here's why. I think that we relate to the stories. We hear that. I didn't know. I was the guy that didn't know where Gabon is. I've been in Africa for 22 years. But here's the deal. I'm not going to fake it. I just got my phone out. I figured it out. And that's what you're going to do. What I want you to do is not like talk about who you want to be as if you've arrived there. That's what Ananias and Sapphira did. Get real about where you are. See what is that's keeping you back. And then to say, what's my next move? How can I get there? I love the definition. It's Hebrews 11:1. It's the definition of faith. And here it is. Faith is confidence in what you're hoping for and assurance of what you haven't seen. I know in junior high school, what I was hoping for was a date. I wanted it in the worst way. Never quite happened, but I rolled into high school and I still had the same hope. I want a date. 4 years of high school, I repeated a grade. No date. It was happening to everybody else, but like not to me. I squeezed 4 years of college into 5. Same ambition. I want a date. Nothing with a face like this. Who could imagine? I was in my second year of law school, and sweet Maria walks in the room, and I was like, yes, you will be mine. I asked her out on a date, and she said no as well. I'm like, do I have something pinned to me? I heard that she was going to be at this camp, and she was going to be leading some high school girls as the work crew. So I'm no dummy. I got 12 high school guys, and I got adjacent to where she was. And the first night, this elderly woman, her pacemaker stops. She face plants in the spaghetti. She's gone, like, go to Jesus, out of here. But I knew how to do CPR. And so I started pushing on her chest. I am blowing into her wrinkled lips. It was not the first kiss I was hoping for. And she lived, full Lazarus. And I knew I had a future in medicine. What I want you to do is this. I thought, Maria thought this guy's not much to look at, but he could be useful in a pinch. What I want you to do is to say, what is it that you can get adjacent to? You've had this idea of missions. You've thought about doing something with your faith. Maybe you've read Galatians 5:6. The only thing that matters is your faith expressed in love. And you've had this urging. I want you to get adjacent to that. I want you to say, what is it that I need to do, and why am I doing what I'm doing? I wear this stupid ball hat. You guys, I just lost a bet. 8 years ago, my neighbor Carol, she had cancer. We knew by the end of the week she was going to be with Jesus. And she was a huge Red Sox fan. And I've never even gone to a game. Evidently, we have a major league team in San Diego. Who would know? And I told her, Carol, I will wear your Red Sox hat for the rest of my life and represent the Red Sox here on earth. But in exchange, every time Jesus walks by you, you need to mention my name. It's 8 years later, I'm still wearing this. And when I go through New York, through the airport, people hiss at me because they're evidently rooting for the other team. Now, if they knew I was wearing my dead neighbor's hat, they would feel so awkward. And what I want to do is pause for a second. This idea of missions, it's like getting underneath someone else's hat, knowing why they're doing what they're doing, and you understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And that's where we get, what do you want? What faith, confidence in what you're hoping for, assurance in what you haven't seen. And if missions for you, get near some people that are doing missions. That's why you're tuning in. Find people. You don't have to go across the ocean. Go across the street. I love what Jen was talking about the refugees. I mean, here they are right with you. I want to know what we're going to do. Find people who will inspire you with their words. And then you be the kind of person that inspires others with your availability. I'll tell you, I was a teenager and my parents smoked like chimneys. There was no such thing, evidently, as secondhand smoke back then. And I remember there was this young guy that had just taken over as the Surgeon General of the United States of America. His name was C. Everett Koop. Some of you remember him. Do you remember him? Yeah, it was a while ago. I wrote him a letter. I said, my parents smoke a lot of cigarettes and I'm afraid they're going to die. You know what he did? He wrote him a letter on stationery from the Surgeon General of the United States. And he said, your son wrote to me, stop smoking. And they did. It's like, my dad is 95 years old. He's living next door to me. You know why? That guy took 5 minutes to write somebody a letter, to raise his voice. Now, what I want you to do is lift your voice. What do you want? What I want to do is just be available. I want to go out into the missions field, not because I want to convert other people. I want to convert me into a more humble version of me and be available. It wasn't long ago, I was over in Naples, Florida, and walking down the beach and looking at the seagulls. I saw something really awesome going on. So I'm kind of a sucker for taking pictures. This is what was going on. There was these two guys, they were helping their buddy ask the most important question he'd ever ask anybody in his life. And here was the question, will you marry me? You know the reason I snapped the picture is that they couldn't give the answer. All they could do is help him ask the question. Boy, I'm telling you, to ask me what a person that goes overseas with medical missions does, they just help people ask the questions. What do you want? Like, what is it that you're hoping for? And some people are just hoping for a break. They're just hoping for an ease of tension. And I don't know about you, but I've just noticed everybody's just so uptight right now. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, it's just crazy. Oh, I flew here from San Diego. There was all this ruckus. I was just listening to music and writing my next book. And all this ruckus is happening. In the seat next to me, a guy lost his mind. They arrested him on the plane. I'm like, oh my gosh, people are on edge. So what I want you to do is to say, what is it that's distracting you? What's happening is that some of you have this beautiful thing that God has put in your heart, and you've gotten distracted by all the crazy going on. I brought something you can see. I'm big on illustrations. You should have seen me in second grade. I'm like, it's a llama. Here, check this out. Remember these when you were a kid? Remember these? Yeah. So take something really small in your life. Maybe you got married and you had a little dispute. And it started really small, and then all of a sudden, it got really big. That's called catastrophizing. So sometimes what will happen is we'll take something really big and immense like our faith, and we'll make it really small. And so what happens, distraction takes big, immense, beautiful things and make them really small. Do an audit to say, what are the biggest things in my life? What is it that I'm hoping for that'll last? Forget your career. Let's talk about your character. Let's talk about take away everything you know. I'm a lawyer. I've been a trial lawyer for 32 years. And I walked into my office and I quit. It was my own office. I just said, I'm out of here. I went full Cortez. I just burned the ships. What I want you to do is to think about this. What is it that God is doing uniquely in you? What have you been distracted by what's going on around you? And could we get back to that big stuff? Right? Can we get to the things that are supposed to be you? And I'm telling you, one of the easy ways to get less distracted is to get more available. I've written a couple books, and at the end of every book, I put my cell phone number on the last page of the book. Don't call now. I know who you are. You guys, I get about 100 calls a day. It's awesome. I can't get a thing done. It's terrific. I got a call from a sheikh. He said, I'm a sheikh. And I'm like, awesome. I've never met one of you before. And he said, will you come to Saudi Arabia and build a school in our country? I'm like, build your own school. And then he said, would you like to come to my palace? I'm like, yes. So I get there, you guys. When I land, he makes me a latte. You guys, this is the latte. He put his palace on the latte. Like, you are so insecure. And then you know what he did? He took a tablespoon of 14 karat gold and he put it over the top. You think you're paying a lot at Starbucks. He put this, he said, if you drink the gold, it'll make you look young again. I'm like, liar! But what if we give the poor, the hurting, the lonely, the refugees a tablespoon of our very best? What if we're just not distracted about what your faith looks like, but you get back to what it actually is? And Paul talked about his buddy Timothy. It was so great. He was kind of talking about him behind his back. And he said this, I don't have anybody like Timothy. He's a guy who takes a genuine interest in the people around him. Isn't that beautiful? Boy, I'm telling you, I want to be known as that guy. I want to be the one that takes a genuine interest in the people around me right here, the refugees in our community. Don't go to the end of the earth if you haven't gone to the end of your street. Take a genuine interest in the people that God's already dropped in your life and to just say, what is it that's going to last? If you take away everything that you're known for, like whatever's left is who you are. So Bob the trial lawyer. Take away all the trial lawyer stuff. What's left? Oh, Bob, the guy that writes books, take away all the books. What's left? And I think what I want to have it left are the things that 1 Corinthians 13:13 said would be left. Faith, hope, and love. And I'm telling you, if I was darkness, I don't see the devil around every corner, but if I was darkness, what I would do is I would attack the stuff that's going to last. I wouldn't try to destroy you. I would just try to distract you. Because destroy you, that's one and done. Distract you, oh, that'll take you off the game board forever. So what I want to do is say, what is it that's taking you away? right? Taking you away from your faith. What's taking you away from your hope, all the things that are going on around you. And what's taking you away from your expression of love? The only thing that matters is your faith expressed in love. And here's the crazy part. Jesus doesn't need your help. I asked him before he came up here. What he wants is your heart. He wants an authentic version of you. He wants the real you to show up. And you don't have forever to do it. You get 27,373 days on average. Yeah, and I just want to know what you're going to do with this. I brought this because I'm kind of an illustration guy. None of us know how long we're going to live, right? But what do you think? How long are you going to live? I'm just asking one of our friends right here. What do you think? 85. All right. Here, I'm giving you 87. You're welcome. But this ain't happening. Sorry. So I'm 63, and this already happened. So this is what we've got left. Really, and I eat Pop-Tarts. I love those things. So what are you going to do with what you've got left? I don't care if you're 24 listening to that and you feel like you got 7 inches and I only got 3. What are you going to do with what you got left? And then I want to know this, what's going to last? And I'll tell you, the way that you take a genuine interest in the way people around you, undistracted by all the crazy going on in the world, focused on the things that are going to last, fearless, that idea that Paul talked about in 2 Timothy 1:7, that he didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and self-control. I want to just focus on that stuff. And we only got about this much time to do it. There was a trucker, it was outside of Detroit 3 or 4 years ago. He had places to go and things to do, and I'm sure he was late because he was a trucker. And he went under an overpass and he saw a young man standing on the edge. It looked like he was going to jump. That trucker got on the radio. He called every single trucker heading in that direction. He told them about this guy. He told them about the overpass that was happening. He didn't stop there. He got on the radio. He called every trucker going in the other direction and said, there's a kid that's about to make an irreversible decision. And this is what happened next. They all stopped. You guys, that's faith expressed in love. Hey, here's what was said without a word spoken. If you fall, you're not fallen far. But we've got you. Jesus has got you. That's medical missions. That's taking what you know into a hurting world, knowing why you're doing what you're doing, and then not doing it for the applause, because if you make a big deal here, you get a little golf clap. If you don't make any deal about it here, it's just the evidence of your love released into the world. Jesus said we'll be talking about that for eternity. And so if we can get that right, then we just end up moving forward. We just need to figure out what's scaring you. What's keeping you away? I heard this last courageous couple talking about snakes. I mean, I even heard the word snakes and I just tensed up a little. Are you guys with me on that? I'm like, I read about snakes because I'm trying to overcome this fear. Here's what I figured out. You know, anacondas, 25 feet long, they're 3 feet around. And if they wrap around you, you got about a minute when they put the squeeze on you. You know what an anaconda is unusually susceptible to? Alcohol. 1 drop right on its nose. Now your arms would be at your side, so that would be a difficult thing. But what I want you to know, ask yourself is, what is it that you're most afraid of and what is it most susceptible to? Right? And my fears are most susceptible to truth and obedience. And so if somebody says, like, I feel this calling to medical missions, I'm like, hey, let's speak a little truth over that and a big dollop of obedience. What is it that God wants you to do? And Jen just said it so well. Hungry people, thirsty people, sick people, strange people, naked people, and people in jail. That's it. Put a bunch of that on top. And don't just say, you know, these are just swell kinds of thoughts, but to say, like, let's actually do this. I teach at Pepperdine Law School. Could you imagine me teaching at a top tier law school? Like, everybody passes the bar. You get a car. You get a car. You get a... I also teach at San Quentin. Every 3 weeks. The guys in my class there don't change. They're actually in there for quite a while. And the guys at San Quentin, though, I'm doing because I go there to learn. They haven't learned a thing from me. Jesus didn't say, go to hungry people and thirsty people and sick people and strange people and naked people and people in jail because it's like doing a solid for Jesus. He did it because if you want to meet him, you got to meet them. And so when it talks about sick people, I want to meet Jesus. I think you guys do too. It's way up on my list. What I want to do is follow the path that he said. He said, if you wanted to meet me, you'd have to meet them. There's a guy that plays a whole bunch of music, and he was swinging through San Diego on this tour, and I went back early to just catch up with him in this little room they had behind the stage, and there was a guy sitting at the end of the table, and I didn't know him. I guess he knew somebody in the band, and so the guys and I were talking and catching up on old days, and he just kept staring at me. Like, yikes. And so I was just like, la, 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 la. So it was time for them to go out and take the stage, and me and this guy, like we walked over to get in through a side door and take our seats, and I walked through the door, nobody thought anything. He walks the door, people lose their minds. This guy, it turns out he's an actor. His name is Jim Caviezel. In The Passion of Christ, he's the Messiah. You guys, I was in the room with Jesus for 45 minutes. I didn't even know it. And I'm telling you, Jesus is in the room. You go do the stuff that Jesus talked about in Matthew 25, when, to go to hungry people, Jesus is in the room. You'll find sick people, Jesus is in the room. You want a reason to go do what you're doing? You want to have that? Go just say, I want to meet Jesus. And he promised if you meet them, you're going to meet us. But you got to figure out why you're doing the quirky stuff you're doing in your life. We can't take other people far if we haven't gone deep ourselves, right? You need to do a little of this introspection. And so I got invited by one of these guys that's in San Quentin to pitch batting practice. And I wasn't a very good throw in high school, but they've got this kind of like humble, diamond in the center of the yard at San Quentin. And so I said, sure. And so I got up on the mound and I threw this ball and it kind of went over the plate and this guy just crushed it. I mean, it was like a jailbreak. I think it's still going. I picked up another ball. I threw it over the plate a little harder and he crushed that one. And then you know what he did? He started crowding the plate. And you guys, that just ticked me off. And I thought, I'm going to brush him back. And so I wound up, I threw the balls hard. I hit him right in the head. Oh, people, pro tip here, do not hit a guy who's in for murder in the head with a ball if he's holding a metal bat. And so we had a decision to make, each of us. He had to decide if he was going to charge the mound, and I had to decide if I was going to run away like an 11-year-old girl, and I decided I was gonna. And so what we did instead, we had a conversation. We just talked about, man, what was going on inside you, Bob, that just made you want to brush me? You hit me. And I said, well, what made you crowd the plate? That ticked me off. And I want us to have these kind of honest conversations. We only got this little bit of time to get it done. Let's have those conversations. 27,373 days minus every Pop-Tart you eat. That's what you've got. Let's jump in. And ask the questions, but don't feel like you need to have an answer for everything. Did you know in 3 years of Jesus's public ministry, he asked 307 questions? Get this, he only answered 3. Is that crazy? In 3 years. Here was the first one. It was a lawyer like me who was trying to set him up, and he said, what's the big commandment? And he said to love God with your heart and your soul and your mind, and love your neighbor like yourself. The second question, somebody said, will you teach us how to pray? And he said, yes, I will. Our Father, you know how the rest goes. And the third one, he was in front of Pilate. And Pilate said, so you're the king of the Jews, huh? And he said, yes, I am. I'm telling you, you don't have to have an answer for everything, but you got to have an answer for this thing. You got to know why you're doing what you're doing. And if you're crystal clear on why you're doing what you're doing in medical missions, this is just going to be unstoppable. I don't want my faith to be the summary of all the doctrine I believe, because I met people that have great doctrine and lousy theology. I want to have great doctrine and great theology. And loving people the way that Jesus did is awesome theology. Go do that. Go do a ton of that. Get to the thing. I'm fascinated by idioms, like, a phrase that is passed on. It has a meaning aside from the phrase. Somebody had said, I'm going to cut to the chase. That has never happened to me. I'm always a little bit all over the place. But he said, I want to cut to the chase. And so I looked that up. Do you know where that phrase comes from? It comes from Hollywood. During the silent movies, there would be Charlie Chaplin. He'd have a cane or something, but nobody knew the plot in the movie. So they always put a chase scene in there. And so cutting to the chase means to get to the part where something happens. And if you believe in Jesus Christ, if you made a deal with him, you said, hey, this is going to change everything in my life. I'm going to be that new creation that you talked about. Cut to the chase. Get to the part where something happens. Don't do it because people will think well of you. Do it because Jesus is in the room. And he's in the room here, and he's in the room there, and he just wants us to do courageous things. Find something more courageous to do than everything you've done before. And I'm telling you, that is going to lead you on an amazing adventure. I had been hearing what you had been hearing 4 or 5 years ago in Afghanistan, what was going on with these women that were under the thumb of the Taliban. They wouldn't let them learn how to read or write, and it just ticked me off, but I don't know anybody in Afghanistan. Do you? Yeah. So I got on WhatsApp. I met this guy. He said he's from Afghanistan. I'm like, awesome, I'm looking. And so we're sending messages back and forth, but I don't know what team he's playing for. And you cannot be talking to the wrong team. So I'm trying to kind of tease it out. I'm like, so how do you spend your day? When I say the word enemy, who pops to mind? Crickets, nothing. So I'm no dummy. I went back to Washington, D.C. and met with our team and said, do you know who this guy is? This is what they said. He's a good guy. I'm like, got any more detail? Nothing. We keep asking these questions of Jesus, and he just says, follow me. He just says, come. I'm not giving you the details. This isn't a business trip. It's an adventure I'm inviting you on. And so if Medical Missions is calling your name, just jump into this adventure. Don't put your toe in the water. Grab your knees and do a cannonball. I flew to Afghanistan to meet this guy. What a bad idea. I flew in to Kabul and knowing nobody. When I landed, I got a text message from this guy. He said, Bob, I can't meet you at the airport. I'm like, shoot. I'm not sure if that's what I said, but you get the idea. He said, what you need to do is leave the airport and start walking through Kabul alone. And people, I do not blend. He said, you're going to find a car. The engine will be running, and the last number on the license plate's a 7. Get in the car. Now, how many of you people are like, I'm out of here? How about you Enneagram 7s? Like, what could possibly go wrong? So I started walking. I found the car. I found the engine. I got in. There's a guy that doesn't speak English, and I don't speak him. I get another message from this guy. You know who I'm talking to? A guy right at the top of Afghanistan's leadership. You know what he wanted to know? He wanted to know if I would trust him enough to do what he told me to do. Then he'd trust me enough to build a girls' school with me, you guys. And we did. We built this school, and the girls just started coming. We went to the people in charge. This guy's, he's the one in charge of the whole area. And we just did it with kindness and respect. That idea that in 1 Peter, it said to always be ready to make a defense for the hope that's within you. And I met a lot of people that want to be Jesus's lawyer, and he doesn't need one, and you're not good enough. Newsflash. But he said to continued on, but do it with kindness and respect. I'm telling you, dealing with people with kindness and respect, not being there to teach, but to say, I just want to be helpful. What is it that we can do? How can we move the needle into the lives of some little kids? And this is what started happening. These little girls started coming every single day. Hundreds of little girls started giving them balloons. We just started painting balloons on their arms and feet. We started seeing them the way that God sees them. And I think there's something beautiful that happens when we're the ones that are actually moving forward with our faith, finding ways to connect with people. Then what we do is we see this happen. This picture was not taken 4 years ago. This was taken 5 weeks ago. When the Taliban took over again, we went back to the people in charge and we said, will you let our girls go back to school? And it was like we did this Jedi thing because they said yes. What would happen if you knew why you were doing what you were doing, that you knew you served the Lord of the universe, and he doesn't seem to like lawyers much, but he's nuts about kids, and to say, what if we make that happen right here? And in addition to that, what if we make it happen? There are 10,000 Afghan refugees in San Diego right now, but just hungry people. We got a truck. I had 2 heads of lettuce in the back of it the first time. And it turns out people wanted the lettuce. And so there's 500 families 3 times a week that are like finding a way. This isn't about us being the heroes of the story. And it's not us being the victims of all the things that we tried and didn't work. It's participation that God is inviting us to. He says, if you can just bring all of your concerns to me, if you can just bring that to me, then I will do exceedingly, amazingly, mind-blowingly, this is me riffing on the idea, more than you could ever ask or imagine. What we need to do is show up. I remember when I asked Sweet Maria to marry me, I got down on one knee, and I'm emotionally incontinent. I mean, I just cry at everything, which is really a problem if you're a trial lawyer. I said, will you? And then I started crying. And she said, marry me? I'm like, that. Philippians 1:6. It says that God will complete what he started in you. But here's the deal. We got to start it. And I don't want you to just go on this. We don't need a bunch of Red Bulled out, over-caffeinated Christians just like ricocheting off. We need people who know why they're doing what they're doing. That this high calling from the God of the universe, that if we met hungry people and thirsty people, if we cared for sick people and strange people, people that kind of creep you out, people that creep you out the way you creep them out, people that are naked in jail, that we would actually see that Jesus is in the room. And so I just want to invite you guys, whatever it is that's rustling around in you, could you just start moving around with that? To just say, what is it that you want? What is it that you're hoping for? What is it that you have confidence that you haven't seen yet? Make the call. I got on WhatsApp. Find your next courageous move and then make it. I'm going to close with this, Zechariah 4:10. I'm a grandpa now. And so I can relate to this thing that to not despise the small beginnings, because the Lord delights in watching the work begin. How many of you, if you had a grandkid or one of your children and they took their first step, you'd say well, I've seen better. No, of course not. You'd say, this is awesome. I'm going to have my 3rd grandkid this week. It may be happening right now. Who knows? But I'm living in constant anticipation. I'm looking at my head's on a swivel, and go do that with your faith. Whatever it is that God has planted in you, like Paul talking to Timothy, to fan the flame of this unique gift that God has given you. And I bet you, it's going to lead you to poor, hurting, lonely, isolated people, maybe afar and maybe across the street. God bless you guys.
Tremendous word from Bob Goff as Bob makes his way over to the desk. I want to encourage you to make sure you send in your questions from across the globe. Post them in the comments section and our team will be sure to see them. Also want to point your attention to the prayer room, which will open tonight. right after the virtual broadcast. If God has triggered something in your heart tonight, or you need prayer in your life, or your ministry perhaps, there will be members of the M3 team on standby to pray with you and lift your needs to God. Bob is here. Bob, it's always fun to hear you. The story about the hat, I had never heard that before.
Isn't that crazy?
Have you never taken it off?
I haven't,
Really?
to Maria's chagrin. Yeah, when the Red Sox finally won the World Series, or whatever, my only sport is cheesecake, but like they won the big game, whatever that was, and I went to her graveside and I said, Carol, can I take this stupid hat off? And nothing. So I'm just making good. Be careful the bets you make.
Well, Bob, I appreciate your talk tonight, your new book that's coming out, Undistracted. In fact, we have a couple of questions that have come in from our audience, and they're kind of related to that. I thought this was a really good one. How frequently have you found that people, even Christians, seek distraction in their life on purpose, maybe a numbing agent, or because they're unhappy in their life?
Yeah, sometimes, and it happens to all of us, we have our preferred ways of kind of numbing out or dealing with ambiguity in our life. And we all deal with it differently. Sweet Maria Goff is not somebody that wants to go around and be with a lot of people, right? So her world is me, the people we made, the people they married, and the people they made. That's the beginning, the middle, and the end. So she's like the wise owl, but I'm Tigger, right? I want to be around everybody. And what I learned when I was really young is that I had this story that I made up for myself. The story that I made up for myself, because some nutty stuff happens to all of us. At 8 years old, I concluded everyone is going to leave me. I will be rejected by everyone. Is that crazy? And now I don't come across as a really insecure guy, but I remember the story being everyone's going to leave me and being very insecure. And then what I did is I made rules to support the story. So what was the rule? Don't go deep with anybody. Oh, be funny. And then you can just be snorkeler. You won't be a scuba diver. You don't actually have to go deeper than 1.5 feet. And so if you figure out the stories that you made and then the rules you made around those, they were actually helpful for your little 8-year-old heart. But to just say, let's update this. I'm 63. Does that need to be true? Was it ever true? And I think if we figure out that, we'll figure out why are we doing what we're doing. So if you just say you have these, you could be in your 20s or 30s and not have any deep relationships, and you say, I wonder why that is. Oh, the rule is just keep it superficial and all that. So it isn't always an activity. It can be like the way that you have set some boundaries. And the beautiful thing about this idea about it being a new creation is that you can leave that behind. You can say, that's old Bob. Old Bob's on the bus. Like lawyer Bob, he's out of here. And to say like new Bob, Grandpa Bob. And who does he want to be? And he just wants to be available to his family.
That's beautiful.
That's really good.
You know, Bob, I had a quote out of your book I wanted to ask you because it really struck me. It says, distractions are not riptides, they are slow-moving currents. It will lead you away from your ambitions, your relationships, and your joy every time. I like that slow-moving currents. They're very subtle, aren't they? Sometimes.
Yeah, you don't know. I think the context of that, I've sailed to Hawaii a couple times, which cracks me up because I get tremendously seasick. It's good for a great weight loss program. That's good for 20 or 30 pounds. It's a little messy, but effective. There's a current that will take you from Cabo to Maui. And it goes at 10 inches every minute, which is pretty fast if you're moving from one side of the couch to the other. But from Cabo to Hawaii, I mean, you're not going to make it. And so what I want us to do is find a little bit faster way to get to where we're going. So people that would say, even with activating their faith, that someday I'm going to, or as soon as I pay off my student loans, I'm going to, or some. And so what happens is deferral can be one of those things. That if I just pick something beautiful, but then defer it to another time, that it doesn't make me feel guilty. It's definitely on my list. You just never get to it. And so I'm really on that hunt for deferral in my life.
Yeah, that's so good. You know, you mentioned that we need to have honest conversations with ourselves. We hear that, but how do we do it?
Yeah, sometimes find a safe friend. And you'll know they're a safe friend because they won't tell you what to do they'll remind you about who you are.
Oh, that's good.
Like they're not there blowing sunshine at you. You just say, I see who you guys are. I know your love for people. Like, and to say, if there's a behavior or something going on that seems inconsistent with that, they're not like calling you out. And they're just saying, hey, tell me, like, help me connect the dots on that.
That's so good.
Yeah, there's somebody that helped me kind of connect. I was like covered in freckles as a little kid, and still am. And there was this particularly mean person. I'm not going to give you my sister's name, but but what Karen would do is, she called me Spot, and it just hurt my feelings, like of just like little insecure Bobby Goff. And there was a person that took a genuine interest in me. They got a Sharpie and they started connecting the dots. I was the first kid in 2nd grade with ink on both arms. They made giraffes and rhinos. Wow. I loved my freckles. They were endless possibilities. And so I would say, in answer to your question, find some safe people that'll help you connect the dots between your faith, between the opportunities, and then have your head on a swivel. If you have a beautiful ambition, and then it crosses with an opportunity, be there.
Yeah, so good, so good.
Yeah, another question for you, Bob. Was there a moment in your own life where distraction actually kept you from a moment where God wanted you to pay attention to what was happening?
Oh, I'll tell you 2 things that spring to mind. I wake up in the morning and we've got this little tiny boat. And I went out in the bay to watch the sunrise. I just wanted to I got this much life left. I want to soak in the sunrise. So I saw this great sunrise, and this is kind of a unique boat. It didn't fancy, but it's kind of unique. And I got back in, I was in the house, and I'm sitting with a little fire, and I'm sitting there. I look way across the bay, and there's another boat that looks just like mine that pulled into the bay. And so I got the binoculars out and I'm looking, I'm like, crazy, who would have thunk that? And I looked a little closer, it's my boat. I got out of, this is the guy who just wrote a book called Undistracted. Like, I got out of the boat, I never tied it up at the dock. I just went inside. I'm like, I should not operate heavy equipment. Another time when I was in college, I was thinking back about times where I got distracted. There was a guy that was a luthier. He made guitars, and he had shavings everywhere. He looked like he was with the Doobie Brothers. He had like shavings in his beard and on his clothes. And I asked him, will you teach me how to make a guitar? And he said he would. And so for the next 6 months, we bent the wood, we put everything on there, carved the neck. The last thing we had to do is put the fretboard on it. And then he got sick, and then I got whatever he had, and the school ended. And I was in my attic trying to kick my kids and all their junk out of our house. Yeah. Is that happening with you guys?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
I'm like, take it with you. And so I found this guitar case. I'm like, whose guitar is this? I open it up. It's my unfinished guitar. All I needed to do was put the fretboard on it. 44 years. Wow. It had sat almost ready to play a song. And so what I did, I still didn't know how to put the fretboard on. I found a guy to put the fretboard on. A day later, we string it up and play some music. And here's the thing. We have this thing. I'm back to deferral. What happens is we have this beautiful ambition. We're going to do missions work. We're going to engage the world. We're going to take our faith out for a spin and see what happens. But then we just don't quite get there. And I just want to find somebody who will help you get the fretboard and make some music.
So beautiful.
One of our guests that's here, actually, I thought this was interesting. A lot of people give into distraction, Bob, because they lose track of what God has done in their lives. Is there a, quote, Bob Goff origin story, an inciting moment maybe that really created your faith as it currently stands? Maybe an inspiration for us all to remember our own God story.
Yeah, the thing that sprung to mind is a realization. It would be evident to anybody else, but I thought it was supposed to be my dad. And he's a terrific guy. He lives right next door to me. But I realized in college, I'm not him. And he's not me, nor did he ask me to be him. Something really beautiful that happens when we just kind of get comfortable in our own skin and realize that God's up to something unique in me that he might not be doing in someone else's life. One thing that'll punk you every time with distraction is comparison. Like if I try to compare myself with these amazing people that you've had speaking, I'd go like, well, what have I got? I would be like, following Kenny G playing the kazoo. But I love this idea that God never compares what he creates. And so I just delighted watching and listening and knowing each people, even those of you that are tuning in, what God is doing in your life. I'm not comparing. I just want to see what it is and get delighted. And then a realization that God's given us what we need, right? 2 Peter 1:3, and it says that God has already given us everything that we need to lead beautiful lives. And so what I want us to do is to just kind of take inventory. Say, what's God given me? Has he given me an opportunity, a talent? But just because you have a capability, I'm a pretty good lawyer, but just because I'm capable of being a lawyer doesn't mean I'm called to be a lawyer. And so if you need to have your burn the ships moment, there has never been a job I've taken that on the first day of the job, I didn't write my resignation letter. It wasn't fancy, just 2 words. I quit. And I put it in an envelope. I address it to my brand new boss, put a stamp on it, and give it to Sweet Maria. And I tell her, if this job ever gets in between me and you or me and Jesus, you mail that thing in, you don't even need to tell me, I'll find out. And then so some of you may be that you're not getting to this big, beautiful calling that God's given you because you're waiting for permission. And I just want to say you have permission. You have permission to be a new creation. You have permission to be bold. You have permission to love people without an agenda. Just don't have anything on the other side of the equal sign. Have an agenda for yourself. Don't have it for anybody else. And there's something beautiful. Let your faith guide your steps. And the funny thing is that you're going to find out more about yourself. I found out more about myself listening to the stories tonight, the things that you guys have been talking about. And so make this typical, make this commonplace that you're surrounding yourself with people that have lifted their eyes to just say, is there a more beautiful story to be told? I love that. Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. Like, so write it down. Like, don't let, I have a bias towards writing things down. I bet I send myself 150 emails every day. Like, literally, I get home, I'm like, him again, block. But what if when something pings you, write that thing down. You don't want to go to a gathering like this and say, how was it? And say, swell. You say like tell me why. So maybe taking that moment, write it down.
Beautiful. Bob, just we've been talking a little bit about your new book that's coming out, Undistracted. Just kind of an overview, just a synopsis of the book itself and your encouragement for those of us that are joining us tonight at the M3 conference on how to get that out of our lives.
Yeah, you just got to know it. You just got to spot that, create the sniffer for what it is and sniff out distraction to say, oh, this is little insecure Bobby Goff looking for validation right now. And as soon as you sniff that out, then you can say, now we know what's going on. You saw the story. The story is you will be rejected. What do you crave? Acceptance. What are you doing? All kinds of crazy stuff that God hasn't called you to do. And if we do that, then we can start rewriting the story. And so this is it. What's making you do what you do? And then how can you have this idea to make your requests known to God? But this is a God who says, I know what you want before you ask for it. I think it starts with making it known to yourself. To say, this is what's going on. I am just so anxious right now. But don't just say, I want to be happy. Let's just drill down on that. Say, what's happy look like?
And don't you think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but don't you think sometimes distractions can, on the surface, look good?
Totally.
That will keep us from our God-given purpose, right?
Totally. And if golf is your thing, like, awesome. Hit that ball. But if you're doing that because you're trying to create some distance between you and the argument that you haven't been able to resolve or the relationship that's really difficult, then just bring that to Jesus and to say, give me the guts and the grit to find the words or better words to describe that thing. And I'm not going to chase a little white ball anymore, or I'm going to do plenty of that. And then I'm going to go home and have the conversation we need to have.
You know, Bob, I think you epitomized this, but I love one of the things you said. This isn't a business trip, it's an adventure.
Yeah.
That's the way that our life should be as new believers, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't need all the details. So you got to figure out what's your relationship with ambiguity. Like I would go, do you like things ambiguous?
Not at all.
Not at all. That's Sweet Maria. She's like, oh, heck no. They are seeing other people. But ambiguity is my friend. Like I go everywhere with ambiguity because it represents all these possibilities. what might happen next. And so that idea in John 17, where you take these two people and you say the two will become one, Maria thought we were going to become her. I'm like, oh, heck no. But she's not trying to be like me, and I'm not trying to be like her. We're trying to be like Jesus.
Yeah, so good, so good.
That is good. Bob, thank you so much.
Oh, it's so good to be with you guys. Thanks for letting me tag along.
Oh, always a pleasure to have you here. An impactful and really a great way to wind up this year's M3 conference. Dr. Paul, before we close things down, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I'll just say a few things that we've learned tonight. Maybe ask Bob to pray for us at the end, if you wouldn't mind. But, you know, I like what Tim reminded us. God loves us too much to let our calling be our undoing. There's a lot to ponder on in that. I love what Nicholas talked about, you know, using going after a comprehensive approach to providing change for an entire community. Not just rescuing people, but how can we change a community? And then I love the way Kieran and Joanna talked to us about taking bold risks to follow the shepherd. So good. Bob, several things I wrote down. My fears are most susceptible to truth and obedience. You can think about that for a long time. If you want to meet Jesus, he's in the room. If you're in the room with hungry people, thirsty people, naked people, people that are sick, and people that are refugees, people that need a room. And I love what you said. Be crystal clear on why you are doing what you're doing, because so often we get in a default mode setting and we just are doing things and we don't even know why we're doing it, and we miss the very thing God's called us to do. And then the last thing is God wants us to do courageous things. I think he wants every one of us as believers, as his followers, to do courageous things. So I think it's been a great M3. We appreciate you watching tonight. We look forward to next year being in person, and we so appreciate all of our speakers. So appreciate Bob Goff for just pouring your heart out to us tonight. And you know, I usually close this in prayer, but would you close this in prayer tonight?
I would be so honored to. So Jesus, you've been eavesdropping on this evening. You've been eavesdropping on our entire lives. Give us the guts and the grit, not to just hear and agree with this stuff, but to make a bold move, to just do a courageous move, only one that we could rely on you to make. And so let us not be hard on ourselves, but to embrace you, to just say that you are in the room and you desire us. And if that leads us overseas to hurting, lonely, isolated people, then make a way. And we pray this in your strong Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Well, as we close tonight, that doesn't mean the M3 community shuts down. In fact, our prayer room is actually going to be opening in just a couple of minutes. Many of the conference resources continue to be available all year round, of course, at m3missions.com. This year's M3 conference will be available in its entirety on demand, M3's YouTube page. And don't forget to pre-register today for the 2023 M3 conference, as Dr. Paul just said, in person again next year. If you register now before the 27th of February, you'll actually get 50% off on your registration. We can't wait to see you again in person. We'd like to again thanks to our sponsors, our church partners and exhibitors, and everyone else who make this event possible. Don't forget Bob Goff's brand new book, Undistracted, comes out on
March 1st.
March 1st, so just a couple of days. I'm sure you can pre-order it now. Of course, we want to thank you for being part of this global M3 community. Our mission for you to connect with the others, to be inspired, and to find your mission is not a one-weekend vision. We want it to be a resource to you all year long, so make sure you utilize the website as a point of connection and make plans now to be part of M3 2023 in person on February 18th and 19th. And we look forward to seeing you then. Until next year, goodbye, and God bless you and your mission.